XM Channel 119 and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning from London. I'm Roger Hearing.
And I'm Naira Chahij. Good morning, everyone. It is 8:01 a.m. in London, 9:01 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. And for a second day, we awake to the reality of geopolitical risk, Roger, and start to ask ourselves how far we can go in terms of Iran's retaliation and whether the US miscalculated.
Well, I was reading some very interesting pieces this morning saying that the issue that's going to be in the Iranians' mind is the extent to which they can respond so that they save face, because this was an enormous attack on them, but don't actually precipitate the kind of US retaliation that could completely destroy their economy.
Okay, so you think that is the approach that they will take then? And does that mean that there is any sort of prospect of de-escalation, or have we gone to the point of no return now?
I think the next few days are going to be key to that, because this kind of calculation is going to be a difficult one to look at. I've heard suggestions that it might be more on the cyber side than anything else.
Yes.
And again, interesting suggestions. One area of cyber weakness, potentially, is the bourses of the world, the stock exchanges. Not as well protected as they might be, potentially a target. Who knows? And that would deliver, I suppose, in Iranian terms, the kind of effect they want. But all this, at the moment, as we know, is speculation. At the moment, there's an awful lot of rhetoric. The funeral is going on even as we speak in Tehran. Massive amounts of people on the streets and a lot of talk about revenge. We'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, absolutely. Tom Keane and myself on Surveillance spoke to retired Admiral James Stavridis on Friday, former NATO Supreme Allied Commander, and he pointed exactly to this cyber risk. I did ask him whether right now the US should be taking, or whether he thinks the US will take a more kind of a preemptive offensive strategy, or whether they'll be more defensive. And he said that actually in the near term probably defensive, but there's going to be so many unknowns in terms of the kind of retaliation that it's going to take actually coordination globally that goes beyond military coordination to sort of de-escalate this in any way.
Coordination has not been the keynote of it, not least a lot of Europeans who are meeting today. There's a NATO meeting today, also European leaders, a bit, I think, disturbed by the fact they had no hint that any of this was coming, and what that means about coordination with Washington remains to be seen.
Yeah, and it does in some ways come back to the unpredictability of President Trump as well. In terms of the unpredictability of markets, well, they've reacted in a fairly predictable fashion in terms of risk off in today's session. Let's start with oil, because we did see Brent go above $70 a barrel. We're actually back below it now at $69.94, up 1.9%. WTI at $64.08 a barrel, up 1.6%. You start to ask yourself, what exactly is priced into this crude move? Have we actually seen the worst of the move, given that we haven't yet seen any facilities actually attacked? How much higher could we go if that happens and supply risk, particularly from Iraq, becomes a reality for markets? Elsewhere in commodities, gold near a 6-year high, or at a 6-year high, $1,572 an ounce, up 1.3%. And in equities, we saw red on the screen in Asia, led by the Japan, which was coming back online after holidays last week. The Stock 600, almost 4 minutes into the equity market open now, is down 0.6%. So on its second day of declines across regional equity benchmarks, the FTSE 100 lower by 0.5%, the CAC 40 down 0.7%, the DAX down more than 1%, the IBEX and FTSE MIB firmly in the red. The S&P 500 had its worst drop in a month on Friday, wasn't helped either by the the ISM manufacturing data, which came in at the lowest since 2009. Dow, S&P and Nasdaq futures all lower right now by at least 0.4%. The 10-year Treasury yield dropped significantly on Friday as well. Again, combination of general risk off, but also the ISM manufacturing data. We're steady now on a 178 handle on the 10-year yield, but that drop in the 10-year yield has led to quite a significant flattening in the 2s-10s curve of some 10 basis points from the highs towards the end of last year. 24 basis points is where we are on that 2s-10s curve in the US. In Europe, the 10-year Bund yield down 2 basis points, negative 30. The yield down a basis point on the 10-year gilt. In FX, no surprise that we've seen the yen somewhat bid in the Asian session, but actually has given up some of its gains to trade flat now, 108.12, Roger.
Okay, well, let's have a look at what the stocks are to watch this morning. Bloomberg's Joe Easton has joined us in our London studio. So, Joe, welcome back. Happy New Year and all that. But what a new year to begin with. Mid-East stocks, I guess, are where we should fix our eyes at the moment, because it was a bit of a slaughter after the news about what happened in terms of Iran, the US and the consequences.
That's right. So, belated Happy New Year to you as well, Roger. And we are continuing the Iran theme, as you've just been discussing. There are some some key sectors to keep in mind when looking at this news. So starting with the obvious place would be the oil market. So at the moment we're seeing shares of the oil companies rallying. So looking at the top stocks in Europe today, around the top 10, most of them are the oil companies. So we're seeing Royal Dutch Shell, BP, Equinor, a whole bunch of oil drillers surging today. Those stocks up around 1.5% this morning. This obviously coming as the crude price jumps, as Naira mentioned in her summary there. And going the other way, one to look out for is the airlines, who obviously are hurt by higher oil prices. So we're seeing companies like Air France and also the IAG stock, those are declining more than 2% this morning. So the oil price having a big effect. And then to also note the gold miners doing well, given that the geopolitical risk adds to haven trades like gold and also the yen. So some of those gold miners are leading the way in Europe this morning among the best performers.
Okay, well, many people, I guess, over the holiday period might have ordered in the odd pizza or curry or whatever. Takeaway.com has neared final victory in their battle with Just Eat, because that market is certainly well sought after.
That's right, so I'll certainly be avoiding takeaways after an indulgent Christmas, but it looks like Takeaway.com is nearing the final victory in the takeover battle for Just Eat, valuing the UK company at around $8 billion. So around half the shareholders in Just Eat have accepted Takeaway.com's bid following that battle between the company and Process that went on at the back end of last year. It looks like the company is going to win the battle for Just Eat. Both of those stocks rising around 0.7% this morning.
All right, Joe, thanks very much. Joe Easton there with Stocks to Watch.
Let's get back to our top stories, Roger. And the consequences from the US killing of a top Iranian general have widened. Tehran says it will no longer abide by any limits on its enrichment of uranium, and Iraq's parliament voted to expel US troops from the country.
The developments led President Trump to double down late Sunday on his tactics. He said he's ready to strike Iran in a, quote, disproportionate manner if the Islamic Republic hits any American target in retaliation for Qasem Soleimani's death.
If Americans anywhere are threatened, we have all of those targets already fully identified, and I am ready and prepared to take whatever action is necessary. And that in particular refers to Iran.
Well, President Trump also threatened Iraq with sanctions, quote, like they've never seen before if it ejects US soldiers.
With Brent crude just below $70 a barrel and WTI trading at 64, the big question hanging over the oil market now is whether Iran will target oil in its response to the US attack. Tina Davis is managing editor for energy and commodities at Bloomberg.
So Iran at this point has two kind of main options, one of which is to strike at the Saudi Arabian oil facilities themselves, which they did back in September. That led to a really quick and very high price spike of about 20% in the next day's trading, but that price spike didn't hold for very long. The other main thing that Iran can do, which is try and shut down the Strait of Hormuz, which is a narrow pathway that accounts for about 30% of world oil supplies.
Well, meanwhile, NATO ambassadors are going to meet in Brussels today to discuss the situation in the Middle East at the request of the Secretary-General, Jens Stoltenberg. That's according to a Reuters report out late on Sunday.
And the UK has repeated its call for de-escalation. Speaking in an interview on Sky News, Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab said de-escalation is absolutely essential.
I think the important thing now is to de-escalate the tensions, to try and restore some stability, and make sure, whilst we're containing the nefarious actions Iran is undoubtedly taking, that door to a diplomatic route out from the international cold is there for Iran. But it's ultimately got to be for the regime and the leadership in Tehran to make that choice.
Raab said he has a meeting with US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo scheduled for next week and will also speak to his French and German counterparts.
And turning to the US, Fed officials see their monetary policy as likely to remain appropriate for the time being, despite persistent downside risks. That's according to the minutes from the FOMC meeting released on Friday. The Cleveland Fed President, Loretta Mester, says the underlying fundamentals are still strong in the US economy.
I think it's great that we can have an economy with 3.5% unemployment and inflation that's well contained. We don't have an inflation problem in any sense in terms of inflation being too high, right? In fact, inflation has been running under our 2% goal. So those fundamentals, suggest that the economy is healthy.
That was the Cleveland Fed President Loretta Mester speaking to Bloomberg.
And meanwhile, New York Fed Chief John Williams said low global interest rates are here to stay due to an array of factors that are basically the hand we've been dealt for the next 5 to 10 years. He added it's important to make sure inflation expectations don't slip too far. Former ECB head Mario Draghi said the euro area faces risks of Japanification, but it isn't currently caught in a deflationary trap. There was a lot of interesting discussions coming out of this meeting, the American Economic Association's annual meeting over the weekend in San Diego, Roger. I mean, Janet Yellen talked about the limits of monetary policy, saying it shouldn't be the only game in town. Ben Bernanke, though, had a really interesting comment in a blog post, so this is separate, but saying that quantitative easing and forward guidance can provide the equivalent of about 3 additional percentage points of short-term rate cuts. So there he's actually hinting that, that we haven't actually hit the limits yet. Although one key thing to note is that his judgment that monetary policy will be able to combat the next recession rests on a crucial hypothesis, and that is that the equilibrium rate is between 2 and 3%. And of course, that is something very much up for debate.
Indeed. Right. In trade news, a Chinese delegation tentatively plans to travel to Washington on the 13th of January for the signing of the Phase 1 of the trade pact. That's according to South China Morning Post. The group, led by Vice Premier Liu He, would return on the 16th of January, and the visit was rescheduled because Beijing hadn't expected Donald Trump to unilaterally declare a January the 15th date, or indeed to agree to endorse the deal, even if Xi Jinping was unavailable.
Lots of top stories. Let's get to the global news now with Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans. Hi, Leanne.
Good morning, Naira. China's new director of its Hong Kong liaison office says he has every confidence in the one country, two systems framework. Liu Huinin is seen as a Communist Party strongman. He is credited by state media as having reinvigorated China's northern province of Shaanxi. That's after enforcing the central government's campaign to purge corruption and weed out disloyal officials.
We have confidence that the Constitution and the Basic Law will be fully enacted in Hong Kong. That will maintain the one country, two systems policy and ensure the city's long-term prosperity and stability, thanks to the joint efforts of Chief Executive Carrie Lam, her government, and all parts of the community.
Crossing over to Europe, Spain's acting Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez is on course to form a new government as soon as tomorrow. Bloomberg's Charles Penty says this comes after lining up enough support in Parliament to stay on as Prime Minister.
In a first vote on Sunday, Sanchez won 166 votes in favour to 165 against, but that wasn't enough to win parliamentary approval for his bid to stay in power. In the second round of voting in Parliament on Tuesday, however, a simple majority will be enough, and while the numbers are very tight indeed, it looks as though Sanchez has the support he needs to launch his government in coalition with the anti-austerity party Podemos. In Madrid, Charles Penty, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And firefighters in Australia are getting a break. Their attempts to control raging wildfires were aided by cooler weather and some rain today. Still, authorities warn that dangerous conditions will return this week. Fires in southeastern Australia are blamed for at least 24 deaths. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
In today's volatile markets, investors need resilient portfolios to help handle the pressure. Through decades of expansions and recessions and changing interest rates, clients have turned to PIMCO to help them stay on course, no matter what course markets take. PIMCO, active fixed income solutions that aim to give investors an edge. All investments contain risk and may lose value. Investing in the bond market is subject to risks. Consult your investment professional prior to making an investment decision.
Hi, I'm your host, Smokey Colbert, filling in for Smokey because after 75 years of...
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Turns out there's much more to say. Nearly 90% of wildfires are caused by us humans being careless, dumping our used barbecue coals willy-nilly. Guess the song was wrong. We did start the fire. That's why I respect Mother Nature and her trees, whether coniferous or new car scented. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Heidi Stroud-Watts.
Sarah Vakhturi, founder and president of SVB Energy International, joins us now. Sarah, we've seen tensions between the US and Iran previously. They've usually had a pretty short-lived impact on the oil market. Does this feel like a longer-term issue for crude markets to you?
Exactly. I remember we had same discussion the first day that the market opened after the Saudi Aramco attack back in September, and we were discussing, and I mentioned that we don't think this is going to be a long-term or high-risk premium. The reason for that was that at that time, market was clearly understood the magnitude of the disruption in Saudi Arabia and had an approximate estimate of when Saudi production is going to be restored. Whereas this current tension that we're talking about is just the beginning of the game. No one is sure that what would be Iran's retaliation, what would be U.S. responses, and how things are going to affect each other. So what we think is that potentially what we call it Qasem Soleimani's risk premium on oil prices could be something that even could go even higher and stronger than the Saudi attack that we observed in September of last year, and for a longer term.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Roger Hearing. Now time for a Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Over to the First Word breaking news desk in Berlin for today's morning call. Here's Richard Jones. Richard, good morning.
Good morning, Roger. It's a sea of red across most Asian equity markets today. The Nikkei 225 traded lower by 1.9%, with the Kospi and Hang Seng also both down 1%. The Shanghai Composite reversed early resilience, closing steady on the day after trading as much as 0.8% higher earlier in the session. The E-mini S&P and E-mini Nasdaq futures are also trading lower, both down by 0.4%. European equities have also opened lower this morning, with the Euro Stoxx 50 down 0.8%, the DAX down 1.1%. The CAC down 0.75%, and the FTSE 100 down 0.4. Turning to bond markets, the U.S. 10-year yield is trading steady at 1.79%, with the 10-year German bond yield down 2 basis points at minus 0.3%. In the FX space, the Bloomberg Dollar Index is little changed, while it is worth noting that gold jumped to a 6-year high, now trading slightly off the session peak, currently up 1.3% at $15.72 per ounce. Looking ahead to the European event risk calendar today, the highlight today will be the release of composite and services PMIs from Italy, France, Germany, the Eurozone, and the UK. We've just had those PMI readings from Spain, with both the services and composite readings coming in above survey consensus expectations. That's it from me. For more macro breaking news, it's SQUA Go on the Bloomberg Terminal. Roger?
Thanks, Richard. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world. Leanne.
Roger, good morning. In Venezuela was a day of political chaos. Security forces barred opposition leader Juan Guaido and his backers from entering the National Assembly. That allowed supporters of President Nicolas Maduro to choose their own assembly president. Guaido and his loyalists went off-site and re-elected him anyway. That drew praise from the US and Europe, which opposed Maduro. More than 2 years after a wave of sexual assault allegations against Harvey Weinstein, the filmmaker is facing the start of a criminal trial today. He's pleaded not guilty and says everything he did was consensual. More than 75 women have come forward publicly to accuse him of sexual misconduct. And finally, Hollywood has kicked off its awards season with the Golden Globes. As the World War I epic 1917 was the big winner, the Universal Pictures movie won the prize for Best Drama. Sam Mendes also took home the prize for Best Director. 1917 beat out three movies from Netflix: The Irishman, Marriage Stories, and The Two Popes. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you. Whenever I hear about these awards, it just makes me realise how little I watch films.
I'm exactly the same, but I've got something to say. We don't just have to watch films. Phoebe Waller-Bridge, you remember the actress and the writer of
started
Fleabag?
Watching Fleabag.
It's amazing. She won 2 gongs, so really good for the British
just
person.
started watching it?
Yes,
Been
because
around
I
a
had
while.
but I had to watch it with somebody who had a TV licence because I don't have one.
Well, I must just say, you'll start watching it and you'll be totally addicted. I think I watched it in about 2 days.
Yeah. Anyway, let's get back to the story that we're all addicted to globally in terms of geopolitical risk. President Trump threatening Iran with major retaliation if they do anything to avenge the US killing of top military general Qasem Soleimani. Tehran has already said it will no longer be bound by the 2015 nuclear deal on enrichment of uranium, while Iraq is calling for all American forces to be expelled from the country. For more, let's go live to Dubai, where Bloomberg's government reporter Zainab Fatah is standing by. Zainab, great to have you with us. Looking at the response over the weekend, both from Iran and Iraq, is there a sense that the US made a grave miscalculation last week?
Well, there is definitely a sense of trepidation, and a lot of analysts are saying that the action taken by President Trump led to an escalation when there is no clear evidence he has any plan of how to take this further and how to de-escalate the tension that started with the killing of Soleimani. So today we've seen in the region, in the Gulf, which is a region that basically initially embraced the whole maximum pressure campaign against Iran. A lot of the leaders here have been very unequivocal in their attempts to urge the U.S. to de-escalate the tensions with Iran. And they are worried that this would end with a regional war they would bear the brunt of. So right now it's all a fluid situation with people unsure how will Iran respond. But one thing almost everyone expects, that we will see some kind of response from Iran.
And I suppose, Zainab, one of the issues here is for many of the Gulf leaders, be careful what you wish for, because in the past they've pushed the US towards perhaps a more confrontational position regarding Iran, and now, well, they're possibly on the cusp of a regional war.
Definitely, it's amazing the change of events that happened within less than 12 months. So after urging the U.S. to withdraw from the deal, and after opposing Obama for years when he was executing the nuclear deal with Iran, and they found a willing ear in President Trump. What the Gulf leaders discovered, that this could actually mean actual real life changes to their countries and possible destruction and war. And they saw wars across the region not being won by anyone. In Syria, it led to the destruction of the country, and there is no clear winner in most of these places where conflict is being started and not ending. So they wanted to ensure that, at least from their side, they are trying to push Trump in the opposite direction to de-escalate.
Yeah, as you were saying, Zainab, as well, the big question for everyone now is what Iran's response will be. Do we have any sense what shape it could take?
We really don't know yet. There've been a lot of bombastic talk, not just from Iran and Iranian officials. We are hearing it from Iranian proxies like Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, who yesterday basically said that the only price for the killing of Soleimani would be the removal and the forcing out of all U.S. troops from the region, and he vowed revenge. We are hearing a lot of bombastic talk. Now, what would the country be able to actually achieve on the ground? It's still to be seen. We know that they attacked the Saudi oil facilities. They attacked oil tankers, so people expect something similar, maybe attacks on oil infrastructure and tankers and diplomatic facilities and embassies and so on. But the one thing that many say they're basically Iran is limited, is under severe pressure and sanctions.
We'll see how it all works out. Zainab, thank you so much. Zainab Fatah there, Bloomberg's government reporter, live on the line from Dubai. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Middle East tensions are likely to keep investors on edge this week, with Iran vowing to retaliate for the killing of a top commander last week. Jill Carey Hall at Bank of America says other factors, including trade, are positive for stocks.
The fact that we're seeing some form of a deal take shape is a positive. We have been expecting a de-escalation of trade tensions as we move forward toward the U.S. election.
The economy will also be a focus this week as we approach Friday's December jobs report. Economists expect to see 158,000 jobs created and a steady unemployment rate of 3.5%. The Consumer Electronics Show isn't the venue you'd expect, but Impossible Foods is promising big menu-related news at the trade show this week. The maker of meat replacements has ruled out an initial public offering in the near term. Rival Beyond Meat has seen its shares surge at least 200% since it went public last May. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Are you one of those people who thinks it's okay to drive stoned? I mean, what's the worst that can happen? You end up driving below the speed limit? It's no big deal, right? Wrong. The truth is, your reaction times slow way down when you're high. You not only put yourself in danger, but everyone around you. Talk about a buzzkill. Stop kidding yourself. It's not okay to drive high. If you've been using marijuana in any form, do not get behind the wheel. If you feel different, you drive different. Drive high, get a DUI. Paid for by...
Boredom. Fitness enemy number one. So don't just run. 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 Mix it up. Skip. Run. Skip. Run. Give yourself a lift. Mix it up. Lift. Mix it up. Run. Lift. Splash. Skip. Lift. Run. It's crunch time. Skip. Mix it up. Run. Mix it up. Add a boxing class. Skip. Run. Splash. Skip. Run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing in January. T's and C's apply. Run. Mix it up. Skip. Mix it. Run. Mix it.
It's great being with Eon. Right now, they're offering their customers the chance to win big thanks to an exclusive prize draw, with the top prize being a £5,000 holiday. Where to? Well, you choose the destination, and they do the rest. Another winter warmer from Eon. To check out all the great prizes on offer, for the full terms and conditions, and to enter, go to eonenergy.com/win by the 30th of January.
At the Bank of Santander, they've created Stan, a smart bot that can predict the future of remortgaging.
I read Stan. Will my mortgage rate go up?
1955 was the last time Newcastle won the cup.
No, and try not to mumble.
Playing, let's get ready to rumble.
Meanwhile, at Santander, they can't predict your future, but they'll help secure it with great mortgage rates fixed for up to 10 years. See what's possible at Santander.
Early repayment charges apply. Lending subject to status and criteria. Your home may be repossessed if you do not keep up repayments on your mortgage.
What if your email let you see a project's entire history and not just the messages sent to you? What if everyone else on your team could see it as well? Then it wouldn't be email at all. Move communication from inboxes to channels in Slack. Instead of seeing a partial set of messages about a project, everyone in Slack sees exactly the same thing and moves work forward faster. Slack. Choose a better way to work. Get started at slack.com.
I spy with my little eye something beginning with P.
People.
No, parrot.
I'll have to remember my binoculars next time.
Although you might not be able to see it, your small actions can have a real impact with Shell. Every time you fill up and use Shell Go Plus, you'll be protecting and replanting forests around the world. Make the change. Drive carbon neutral. Shell. Go well. See goplus.shell.com/CO2 for details.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB digital radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
8:30 a.m. in London, 9:30 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. Good morning, everyone. I'm Naira Chehich.
And I'm Roger Hearing, and you're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
30 minutes into the equity market open here in Europe, and we're seeing another risk-off day with markets waking up again to geopolitical risk in the Middle East. The Stock 600 down 0.9% on its second day of declines across regional equity benchmarks. The FTSE 100 weaker by 0.6%. The CAC 40 lower by 0.9%. The DAX leading losses down 1.5%. FTSE MIB is also down by more than a percentage point, and the IBEX down by almost the same. We saw the S&P 500 had its worst day in a month on Friday. It looks like we could have another down day, judging by Dow, S&P and Nasdaq futures, all lower by at least 0.5%. The 10-year Treasury yield had a significant drop on Friday. It continues its slide today, down a basis point to a 177 handle. Looking at the 2s-10s curve, after the pretty sharp steepening we saw at the end of last year, we're now more than 10 basis points lower than that high point. 3 days of flattening on the 2s-10s takes us to a 24 handle. And the bond markets in Europe also having money flow into them, with the 10-year Bund yield down 2.5 basis points to negative 30. 10-year gilt yield on a 72 handle down 2 basis points. In FX, the yen was bid in the Asian session, but it has given up some of its gains. It did touch a 3-month high, though. Dollar yen at 108.01, and we've been seeing the yen bid for the past 3 days. But of course, oil, is that really the flashpoint that we're looking at here? I mean, we're seeing moves cross assets in reaction to the geopolitical risk. Goldman actually out with a call saying that gold is a better way to play the geopolitical risk than oil. Gold up 1.4%, $1,573 an ounce. Brent crude did move above $70 in the session, but we're just below it now at $69.95, up 2%. WTI trades at 64.06, up 1.6%, Roger.
Let's have a look at some of today's top stories. And of course, the top story is the consequences from the US killing of the top Iranian general. Tehran says it will no longer abide by any limits on its enrichment of uranium, and Iraq's parliament voted to expel US troops from the country. In response, Donald Trump warned Iran of disproportionate US retaliation for any military action and threatened heavy sanctions on Iraq if American troops are expelled. And that's unless Baghdad repays billions in military-based construction costs.
And moving on to what else the market is waiting for, it's the signing of the Phase 1 trade deal. A report in the South China Morning Post Beijing says Vice Premier Liu He is preparing to lead a trade team to Washington next week. China correspondent Tom McKenzie has more.
According to the SCMP, they'll be flying out on January the 13th. The signing ceremony, according to President Trump, will happen on the 15th, and then the Chinese will fly back on January the 16th. Of course, what we know in terms of the details broadly is, of course, there's this commitment from the Chinese side in terms of agricultural purchases, things like currency as well, and, of course, changes to things like intellectual property.
The visit was rescheduled because Beijing hadn't expected Trump to unilaterally declare a January 15th date or to agree to endorse the deal if Xi Jinping was unavailable.
More details have been coming out about Carlos Ghosn's escape from Japan. According to the Japanese broadcaster NHK, airport inspectors skipped X-ray checks on large cases before they were loaded onto a private jet. Police reportedly suspect that Ghosn was hidden in one of them.
And US pilots may have to undergo mandatory flight simulator training before they're allowed to fly the Boeing 737 MAX. That's according to Dow Jones. Months ago, the FAA had rejected the idea as unnecessary, but the idea of training has gained momentum recently. It's still not certain when the grounded plane will return to service.
Right, let's get the latest now in global news. Here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans. Leanne, good morning.
Roger, good morning. China is signalling it wants to restore law and order in Hong Kong after 7 months of unrest. It's named a party official described as a strongman and as new top official in this city. Liu Weinan has no experience in Hong Kong. In his most recent job, he enforced a regional campaign to end corruption and purge disloyal officials. Now to Australia. Exhausted firefighters welcomed cooler weather and patchy rain in blaze-ravaged country, even as authorities warned of a return to dangerous conditions later this week. The national death toll since the fires began has now risen to 24. Bloomberg's Jason Scott reports.
With no end in sight to the crisis, authorities are counting the cost after the weekend saw properties in New South Wales and Victoria states razed by fires that grew so large they generated dry thunderstorms. Thousands of people have been evacuated to recreation grounds converted into makeshift camps that are shrouded in toxic smoke. In Canberra, Jason Scott, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
A mysterious pneumonia outbreak has hospitalized 59 people in the central Chinese city of Wuhan, according to authorities. Bloomberg's Jason Gale reports.
7 are in serious condition. The tally is up from 44 cases Friday. Doctors are yet to pinpoint the cause, but have ruled out pathogens including influenza and SARS, and say there is no clear sign of human-to-human transmission or that medical workers have been infected. In Melbourne, Jason Gale, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And finally, strikes against French President Emmanuel Macron's proposed pension reform are entering their second month with no clear end in sight. That's as unions prepare for 2 more days of street protests, with some planning more radical actions. The Prime Minister will start another round of discussions with union representatives tomorrow. Macron has already made unpopular changes to taxes, labour laws and the welfare system. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Now with your morning sport, here's William Esler.
Tottenham boss Jose Mourinho says Harry Kane's hamstring injury is as bad as he feared. Lacking their talisman, Spurs could only manage a 1-1 draw with Middlesbrough in the FA Cup third round yesterday. Mourinho feels losing Kane is a big blow to their ambitions. Elsewhere, a youthful Liverpool team reached the fourth round with a 1-0 win over Everton. Chelsea eased to a 2-0 win over Nottingham Forest, but Crystal Palace are out after a 1-0 defeat at home to Derby. Tottenham face a replay following a 1-1 draw at Middlesbrough, while West Ham beat Gillingham 2-0. Tonight, Arsenal face Leeds at the Emirates Stadium after the fourth round draw takes place. England's cricketers are in a very strong position heading into day 4 of the second test with South Africa. They'll resume their second innings on 218 for 4, a lead of 264 runs in Cape Town. Opener Dominic Sibley is on 85 not out, having made his maiden test 50. England need to win the match to keep alive their hopes of a series victory.
William Esler there with the latest sport. Now, oil is continuing its rally amid those escalating tensions in the Middle East. Overnight, WTI crude gained 2% to $64 a barrel. Brent did surge above $70 a barrel. Indeed, is just 70.03 right now. Goldman, however, argues the boost to price is likely to be short-lived unless there's a significant supply disruption. Well, for more, let's go live to Dubai, where Bloomberg's reporter for Middle East energy markets, Anthony De Paola, is standing by. So, Anthony, thanks for joining us. Now, what do you think is next in the situation? I mean, will things escalate in a way that will push oil again even higher?
Hi, good afternoon. A lot of what we're hearing from analysts and longtime Iran watchers here is that there will be some kind of retaliation. So far, the rhetoric is escalating on both sides, with both President Trump and the Iranian authorities saying that there will be action and reaction to the attack. The Iranians do take their time in finding out how to respond to these acts. They're looking at the long game here as well. They could take many different ways to retaliate to these attacks. So I think that the oil market and markets in particular is going to be looking at a bit of a tense time as we wait to see what the response is going to be. But it seems that there will be some kind of response to this attack, yes.
Yeah, and you're sort of seeing that reflected in the volatility, and we start to ask ourselves, Anthony, whether the worst case scenario is in the price yet. I mean, in terms of options for Iran, of course, one worry is them closing off the Strait of Hormuz. One analyst said the greatest risk to supply would be an attack on Iraq's southern fields. Are these the sort of retaliation mechanisms that we're looking at, or are there others as well?
Well, the main retaliation means that the Iranians pointed to would be striking back directly at the U.S., but that seems to be too risky a proposition. If the Iranians were to strike U.S. bases or U.S. servicemen, that would seem to lead to a more open fight between the two countries, and that's something that Iran wants to avoid. They can't win a head-to-head military battle, so they'll likely go to these more kind of pinprick attacks, these asymmetric type of attacks that could be targeting oil fields, oil facilities, or tankers going through the Strait of Hormuz and exiting the Persian Gulf. There were, as you remember, some attacks in May and June around the Persian Gulf, which the U.S. and Saudi Arabia blamed on Iran. The U.S. and Saudi Arabia also blamed the September attacks on Saudi Aramco facilities on Iran. An attack on something like an oil processing facility, an oil field, something that effectively damaged production capacity, that would be more serious to the oil price than hitting individual tankers.
Anthony, thanks so much. Anthony DePaola there, Bloomberg's report of Middle East energy markets. And we've just been watching on Bloomberg television some film footage coming, or video footage, I say, coming live from the funeral in Tehran. If you wanted a sense of quite how big a thing this is for Iran, you just have a look at the size of the crowds that have assembled there in the Iranian capital.
Meanwhile, equity markets 40 minutes into the open having another down day apart from oil and gas stocks. They're in the green. This is Bloomberg.
Melissa from Michigan. I work an extra part-time job serving lunch at my child's school, but I still can't afford to put food on our table.
Daniel from California. Choosing whether to pay the rent or pay to fix the car to get to work doesn't leave us with much at all. Now we can't even pay for meals.
Hunger is a story we can end. End it at feedingamerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Family properties and investments have been passed to the next generation, but while the business has evolved, has your accountant stayed behind? Burden Accountants and Advisors examines the latest business trends, market conditions, and industry issues to maximize your tax advantages and meet your financial goals. Let Burden use their insight to create innovative tax solutions for your family and your business. Visit burdenllp.com to get started. BERDONLLP.com. Burden Accountants and Advisors. We listen, we solve, we do.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Why has JD...
Welcome to Nuffield Health Fulham, a gym built around you. You get regular health MOTs to create a plan that works for you, with physios and personal trainers on site. You'll find a swimming pool, and our expert team will help you get the most out of your health, fitness, and your membership. Join today to get the rest of the month free. Search Nuffield Health. Specialists in you. 12-month commitments only. Facilities stated are in most gyms. Visit nuffieldhealth.com/terms.
Boredom. Fitness enemy number one. So don't just run. 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 Mix it up. Skip. Run. Skip. Run. Give yourself a lift. Mix it up. Lift. Mix it up. Run. Lift. Splash. Skip. Lift. Run. It's crunch time. Skip. Mix it up. Run. Mix it up. Add a boxing class. Skip. Run. Splash. Skip. Run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing in January. T's and C's apply. Run. Mix it up. Skip. Mix it. Run. Mix it.
We've all had the odd great idea, like careering down that black run when you've never even worn a pair of skis before, or that legendary Christmas when you tried to cook a turkey in the microwave. Well, forget about face planting in the snow or wrestling with poultry. How about trying something new, like treating yourself to a brand new set from our greatest ever range? Because before the 31st of January, you'll get a whopping £1,000 off the perfect model for you. Now that's got to be a great idea. Just visit sayat.co.uk to download your voucher.
Register for downloadable voucher online. Orders until 31st of January 2020. Registered from 1st of January 2020. UK 18 plus excludes Me Electric and Tobacco. 0% offer. Retail sales of new cars at participating dealers only. Cannot be used with any other voucher. T's and C's apply.
At TUI, we're spreading sunshine early by giving away hundreds of thousands of free kids' places. So you can holiday with the little ones for less. Book today and spread the cost with £0 deposit when you pay with direct debit. From splash parks to swimming lessons. At TUI, we cross the T's, dot the I's, and put you in the middle. Direct debit on web bookings only. Free kids' places subject to limited availability. One free child place per 2 full paying adults. Booking T's and C's apply at All Protected.
Hello, I'm here at the Race for Life Pretty Muddy with Great Britain's Jayanti Kaur. Jayanti, do you have a message for the millions tuned in at home?
What are you talking about? Millions of people aren't tuning in to witness me doing a muddy obstacle course.
Well, they absolutely should, Jayanti. You're a remarkable athlete.
I'm a geography teacher.
We're not athletes, we're cancer beaters. Sign up to Race for Life now and get 30% off entry until the 31st of January in partnership with Tesco.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds, or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught, it is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today. Want TuneIn to remind you when the big NFL game is about to get underway? Be sure notifications are allowed on your phone and search NFL on the TuneIn app. Find the game you want to hear under events and tap Notify Me. We'll let you know exactly when it's time to listen in for kickoff. You might already know that TuneIn allows you to listen to all the pro sports leagues wherever you go. But did you know TuneIn is also home to the wide world of college sports?
Open three, DeAndre Hunter got it! Handoff Carruthers, big hole right side. He leaps and he surges in. Touchdown.
From live college football, basketball, and baseball games to podcasts and coaches shows fueling your love for the game in your school. And the best part is, it's all free. Search college sports to find your team or league.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Roger Hearing with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. And 3/4 of an hour into the European session, it's still red across the screen in reaction to the concerns about what's going on between the US and Iran. Stock 600 down 1.15%. FTSE 100 down almost 1%. CAC down 1.18%. The DAX down 1.7%. Very much the one that's ahead as we go into this session. Looking to the US, opening again, gloom on the screen. The S&P futures down 0.7%. Dow and Nasdaq almost down 0.8%. And clearly where we're looking most concentratedly, I guess, is on oil. Brent crude is now over $70 the barrel, 70.15 at the moment, up 2.27%. WTI $64.27 the barrel, up almost 2% there as well. And in terms of treasuries, currently the US 10-year Treasury benchmark 1.77 is the handle. That's down 1 basis point at the moment. And keeping an eye also on the yen, which is very much the haven currency, 107.96. That's up 0.1%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world. Leanne.
Roger, good morning. In New York, jury selection begins today into the sexual assault trial of disgraced movie producer Harvey Weinstein. Dozens of women made allegations against the Hollywood mogul, and it led to the Me Too movement worldwide. Weinstein has pleaded not guilty. He says any sexual activity was consensual. Hong Kong hospitals have admitted 7 more people with flu-like symptoms who had recently travelled to the Chinese city of Wuhan. That brings the total to 15, with patients suffering from pneumonia symptoms. 59 people have been diagnosed with pneumonia in Wuhan, with the cause still unknown. Chinese authorities have ruled out the reoccurrence of the SARS virus that killed hundreds of people in 2003. And finally, top bosses are expected to have already made the equivalent of the average worker's annual wage by 5 p.m. today. A study shows the typical FTSE 100 chief executive earns around £900 an hour compared to a UK-wide average of £14. 2020 will be the first year that publicly listed firms will have to explain pay levels of bosses. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Let's get to our guest for the rest of this hour now. And Jane Foley joins us in the studio, head of FX strategy at Rabobank. Happy New Year, Jane.
Happy New Year.
Great to see you. It was a buoyant start to the year. We've now taken a big hit to risk appetite because of geopolitical risk. Which assets do you think this risk is best played through? You've got Goldman out with a note saying that the upside to oil might be limited unless there are any actual supply disruptions, but also saying that actually gold is a better way to play this geopolitical risk than oil.
And I did read that gold is at its highest level already since 2013. Now, I think gold is an interesting asset because I think last year it became pretty interesting when fixed income markets began to turn, or a lot of them began to turn very negative, etc. And I think if we go back to 20 years, 30 years, when gold was more of a flight to quality asset, it began to lose its shine, to use that to use its pun. And one of the reasons for that is that many people used to think, particularly in the early 90s after the first Gulf War, why would you buy gold as a safe haven when you can buy fixed income when you have a positive yield as opposed to a negative yield for gold in terms of storage and insurance? So when the fixed income market started to turn negative, then I think just automatically the money or many investors started to look at gold then as again a sort of reinvention of its safe haven appeal. So gold is interesting, but I think before we get too excited about safe haven assets, I think we need to try and work out how long will these tensions continue to escalate. Will they continue to escalate, or will they start to die back? And I think the other thing that we've got to remember is that when we've had geopolitical risk in the last few years, it hasn't had the sort of impact on the market that you would have expected, say, 20 years ago or even 10 years ago. And the reason for that is, of course, central banks. Central banks are providing so much liquidity that it's reducing volatility, it's supporting stocks, and it's dulling the impact of bad news. And even if you look back at a year ago, this time a year ago, the market was anticipating a far less buoyant 2019 for stocks than we actually had. And the reason for that was because the market was thinking, well, global growth is going to slow in 2019, which it did, but it didn't have the sort of impact on risk appetite that you would expect because of the cheapness of money.
And that's very interesting because at the moment, obviously, there's a lot of kind of vulnerable areas, not least Europe. In fact, let me just tell you, we've had French PMI data has been coming out this morning for December. Services PMI 52.4, which is exactly on the nose with what's expected, 52.4, and the composite PMI 52, exactly on the nose with composite PMI. We also had Italy earlier. Their composite PMI fell 49.3. Forecast was 49.6. So Europe is a vulnerable area, but as you say, maybe the markets aren't. Maybe the stresses are not as damaging because of what you were saying about central banks. But Jane, let me look at FX in this because it's very interesting. What has happened, what we know has happened, is oil has gone up. That's the one certainty. A lot of the rest of it is rhetoric. And that has an effect, particularly in the EM area and EM currencies, doesn't it?
Well, it does. Obviously, a lot of EM does import oil, and therefore it goes up as a cost, and therefore it brings down growth. So automatically, it has the effect of pushing money out of EM and into more safe haven assets. So there's going to be certain countries, obviously, more vulnerable to the upside and cost of oil than others. But if you look at the benefits, the currency that's benefited the most on the 24-hour basis, or since Friday, I should say, is the Swiss franc safe haven. The next best performer is Canada, and of course that's an oil-related currency. And then you have the yen, which of course is the real staple safe haven currency. So the market is reacting perhaps as you might expect, but it's very difficult now at this point on Monday morning to determine how we're going to be in terms of geopolitical stresses at the end of the week. And it's going to be really, really critical whether or not these escalate or whether they don't, to how assets really play out.
Yeah, and the point that you were making about the correlation between negative rates and gold, Jane, was a point that Christian Nolting, the CIO at Deutsche Bank Wealth Management, made to me last week as well. And it is really interesting because you've seen a big move in gold, but actually, even though money's moved into the yen, it's been a fairly muted move. Is it because of the appeal of gold in the specific environment where we've got central banks pumping liquidity and we've got negative rates that is what's limiting flows into the yen and other safe haven currencies.
Yes, I would certainly say so. I mean, and I think the example is really best made with respect to the Swiss franc, because we know traditionally that as a safe haven currency, and yet we also know the central bank has as a tool the potential for intervention. So the central bank is basically saying, well, you buy too much of the Swiss franc and you could get your fingers burnt quite heavily. If you look at the yen, there is a negative interest rate prevalent still in Japan. So from that point of view, these central banks are making it very clear that they do not want the safe haven flows. They're trying to push it somewhere else, and therefore gold becomes perhaps for some investors' minds, a more natural alternative, particularly when a lot of fixed income markets are yielding so little.
And Jane, where does the dollar go in all this? Because a couple of weeks ago, or the last couple of weeks, we've been talking a lot about the dollar going into an election year in the US, pressures that there are, the concerns about the US economy. We had some interesting figures on Friday about how manufacturing is going there not well. How do you see the dollar going forward?
Well, again, I think it very much depends on risk appetite. If we have money coming out of emerging markets, now if that's because of growth concerns, oil up, etc., it is likely that the dollar will remain relatively well supported. A lot of money from emerging markets, I think, will naturally find its way into the dollar, particularly, as we were saying, when there's negative rates in Switzerland and Japan. However, again, if we look through the course of the year, is the Fed going to remain on hold? Is it going to cut? The market consensus at the moment is suggesting it will remain on hold. We think that there is still the possibility that the Fed will be cutting interest rates. That all has a dollar impact. So sort of net, we think that by the end of the year, the dollar perhaps will be a little bit weaker against, say, the euro, if not the yen. But we don't think there's going to be a huge movement in say, euro dollar in the coming months.
Yeah, and on the euro dollar point then, Jane, and perhaps other G10 risk currencies as well, like the Aussie, I'm wondering, how your view of global growth in 2020 feeds into where you see those currencies going. Because before we got this geopolitical risk rising to the surface, a lot of people were very upbeat about an inflection in global growth in 2020.
Well, we haven't been that upbeat. Compared with the market consensus, we're still very concerned about the relationship, for instance, between the US and China. So, yes, we know that we're going to have phase one signed on January the 15th. Yes, we know that's going to lift risk appetite, as it has really for the last few months. However, we do think that there's plenty of scope for more tensions between the US and China. The fact that there had to be a phase one in the first place, implies that there are various points that couldn't be agreed. We have a lot of hawkish rhetoric from both sides of the political divide in Washington against China. So we think that these will rise again, and we still think that there are going to be concerns about the outlook for Chinese growth, which is still slowing, and therefore for world growth. And from that point of view, we're perhaps not as upbeat about the global environment as a consensus.
Jane, thank you very much. Jane Foley, there, head of FX strategy at Rabobank. And just in the last few minutes, we've had the German PMI as well. Germany December services PMI 52.9, expectation 52, and composite PMI 50.2, and the expectation was 49.4.
Amid all that, we are still seeing red on the screen for European equities. We are almost an hour into the equity market open. We extend losses down 1.25 percentage point now for the Stock 600 across the regional equity benchmarks. Again, you're really seeing these stocks take a leg lower. FTSE 100, CAC 40 and DAX all lower by more than 1%. Same for the IBEX and FTSE MIB. The DAX approaching a drop of almost 2%, down 1.9%. Up next, Anna Edwards and Matt Miller take over Daybreak Europe. This is Bloomberg.
Boredom, fitness enemy number one. So don't just run. Mix it up, skip, run, skip, run. Give yourself a lift, mix it up, lift, mix it up, run, lift, splash, skip, lift, run. It's crunch time. Skip, mix it up, run, mix it up. Add a boxing class. Skip, run, splash, skip, run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing in January. T's and C's apply. Run, mix it up, skip, mix it, run. Mix it.
I used to be a bit of a rubbish sleeper. I'd toss and turn all night, and somehow I could never find the comfy bit of the mattress. It was a proper nightmare. That's what brought me here, testing mattresses in the Which Test Lab. We use a custom-made barrel rolling machine to simulate a decade's worth of use. And the mattresses that perform best are the only ones we recommend for your bedroom.
Which tests harder so you can buy smarter. Visit which.co.uk.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour. But we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium...
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats...
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
What we're now seeing for the first time is this facade of absolute unity beginning to break down in the EU.
We expect that there will be some type of slowdown recession beyond 2019.
The European banking system, although recovering, hasn't recovered, and there are areas of fragility.
We've seen this before, trade talks that lead nowhere, and then tariffs. We just swing from one to the other, and markets get caught in the middle.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe with Anna Edwards and Matt Miller on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning from London. I'm Anna Edwards.
And from the German capital of Berlin, I'm Matt Miller. You're listening to Daybreak Europe on London DAB Digital Radio.
Now, we check the markets for you every 15 minutes here on Bloomberg Radio, and we get to the breaking news. And so let's do that. We've got Euro area December services PMI. Matt, coming in at 52.8. That is above the preliminary estimate of 52.4. But today's data is all about services, and predominantly the issue in Europe has been around manufacturing, as our colleague on the Markets Live blog, Richard Jones, was reminding us a little bit earlier on. But for what it's worth, there is the Euro area December services PMI, a little bit better than expected. Let's check the markets and where we are. Interesting to see that US futures, yes, they point downwards, but not as weak as the European session that is currently underway, down by 1.3% on the Stock 600, the FTSE 100 down by 1.1%, the CAC 40 down by 1.4%, and the Xetra DAX now down by 1.9% on European equity markets. So some quite impressive losses for European equities this morning, all because of ongoing geopolitical tension between the US and Iran. Certainly no signs of calming tensions over the weekend. If anything, things have escalated, at least verbally, if not militarily, and we look for any military escalation, whether that takes into account oil assets or not. Oil prices also reacting once again. We see 64 on WTI, but perhaps more importantly for global markets, 69.93 is the Brent price. We went above $70 a barrel, which was the headline really around oil this morning. Now coming down off those highs a little bit, but still up by 1.9% on the price of Brent. Just checking a couple of other assets for you. The yield on the US 10-year, 1.77%, continues to come down just a little bit as we see buying of safe haven assets, including treasuries, as a result of geopolitical tensions. Matt.
All right, so we're seeing the biggest drops that we've seen in the entire year so far. It's only the third trading day, but it does look
in 3 days, it seems.
It does look very risk off after the U.S. killing of a top Iranian military commander in Iraq. Oil has extended Friday's gain, and gold is surging to the highest level in more than 6 years. Bond yields are ticking lower, as just heard all of that from Anna. For more, let's bring in Peter Chatwell, head of rate strategy for Mitsuo International. And Peter, you expect a further bull steepening this year, but do these developments change your outlook for bonds?
Yeah, they can easily bring them forward. What we were expecting was that Q1 was going to be pretty positive, with the manufacturing sector in the US and Europe firming up as the trade sentiment stopped deteriorating. And then we were expecting there to be an inflection back into bull steepening as the US economy continues to weaken. As I said on the TV broadcast, what we see is that the US monetary policy as set by the Fed is still structurally too tight relative to what the economy needs to keep this expansion going. So if the Fed is on pause, then the expansion moves into a contraction, and then that brings them back in to cut 3 times
this year, we think, and that's what generates this significant bull steepening of the US rates curve. 210s going up to 60 basis points is our forecast.
So would this be driven then by cuts in interest rates from the Federal Reserve? Because typically, bull steepening driven by moves in the short end, so moves in the 2-year, which do tend to react to cuts in interest rates. So you expect to see quite a big reaction function from the Fed this year?
Yes. So it's the market essentially doing what it did last year, but realising that there's another round of it to go. So this would take the 2-year US Treasury note below 1%. It would mean that the market starts thinking of the US interest rates going all the way back down to the zero lower bound, and eventually would be thinking about not just the current asset purchases of T-bills and possibly 2-year coupon paper, but potentially a restart of the long-term securities purchase program from the Fed. So that's where the term liquidity trap comes in. That's what I was mentioning to you, Anna, as well. If we're in this environment, if we're right that the Fed does come in and is forced to ease a lot, then global markets, global yields will continue to be dragged lower. So yes, we're going through some interesting times at the moment, but these interesting times, as I put them, if they are all about rising geopolitical risks, then they'll bring forward this inflection point in the US Treasury curve that we're predicting.
I want to ask you. So I think it's fascinating. You're an outlier here, expecting the Fed to cut 3 times this year. Most people, I think, expect the Fed to stay on hold, or did until these geopolitical issues reared their ugly heads, and maybe one cut. But I wanted to ask you about Ben Bernanke's blog post last week, and I don't know if you saw it, but I'll just read you one line that I thought was also interesting and maybe an outlier way of thinking. He says, quantitative easing and forward guidance can provide the equivalent of about 3 additional percentage points of short-term rate cuts, which seemed to someone who doesn't know anything about it like me to be a lot.
I haven't read the blog post, but when we look at when we're estimating that the Fed's monetary policy is too tight, we're looking at similar sensitivities. And so if the Fed were to go to the zero lower bound, then to really stimulate the economy to keep things going, then the market would need to be thinking about a significant increase in asset purchases to get the effective, we call it the shadow Fed funds rate, to get the shadow Fed funds rate significantly into negative territory while keeping the actual Fed funds rate above zero, then they would need to restart asset purchases.
Your view then, based on all we've discussed, must assume quite a lot of weakness in the US economy to justify a scale of move, as you describe then, Peter. So what is it, which of the indicators on the sort of Fed's dashboard or anybody else's dashboard is going to be blinking very loudly to justify 3 cuts, as you suggest? Yeah,
it's simply that we don't think that the real economy is going to be able to do anything to make any sort of material acceleration from here whilst the dollar is at this level and whilst interest rates are at this level. So really what the Fed will be confronted with is that the dollar will be going up. That will be allowing the economy to continue to decelerate, and if their reaction function is to continue this expansion, then there will have to be cutting rates.
What, just looking at something else that I think we used to pay a lot of attention to, but we don't as much anymore, is euro-yen. What do you think about euro-yen? Because it was a proxy for risk on, risk off, but both are kind of funding currencies for the carry trade now. So what's your take on euro yen.
Yeah, indeed. There is a regime change, so I don't have any strong view about where euro yen would go, because the euro is now such a significant funding currency for various EMs and even for the dollar, for dollar assets. So it's more a case of using, I think dollar yen is the clearer safe haven, thinking about dollar yen. If there is a significant flight to quality, if that goes down to 102, then lots of special things happen in other assets. Then we need to be thinking about the BOJ looking to ease monetary policy to get dollar yen away from what would be what would begin to be a painful level for the Japanese real economy.
But it's no longer that kind of pair. It's no longer, such a clear sign for risk on, risk off euro yen.
Euro yen, no, I don't believe so. Because when we've had this in the past, this was when the ECB didn't have such clear negative rate policy, and when European bond yields were much higher. 3% was a nice level for the Bund and various other European government bonds over a number of years in the noughties. Now that we're in the 20s, I think things are very different.
Okay, Peter, thanks so much for joining us this morning. Happy New Year to you. Peter Chatwell, Head of Rate Strategy at Mizuho International. Let's get up to date on global news flow. Here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrits.
Good morning, Anna. China's new director of its Hong Kong liaison office says he is very confident in the one country, two systems framework. Lu Weinin is seen as a Communist Party strongman. He is credited by state media as having reinvigorated China's northern province of Shaanxi. That's after enforcing the central government's campaign to purge corruption and weed out disloyal officials.
We have confidence that the Constitution and the Basic Law will be fully enacted in Hong Kong. That will maintain the one country, two systems policy and ensure the city's long-term prosperity and stability, thanks to the joint efforts of Chief Executive Carrie Lam, her government, and all parts of the community.
Japan is tightening its immigration procedures after Carlos Ghosn's escape from the country. The former automotive giant skipped bail and fled for Lebanon last week. In the first comments from a Japanese official since the incident, the Justice Minister said authorities were promptly asked to find out how Ghosn left Japan without detection once she became aware of the incident. Firefighters in Australia are getting a break. Their attempts to control raging wildfires were aided by cooler weather and some rain today. Still, authorities warn that dangerous conditions will return this week. Fires in Southeastern Australia are blamed for at least 24 deaths. More than 12 million acres have been burned, and thousands of people have been forced into makeshift camps. And crossing over to Europe, Spain's acting Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez is on course to form a new government as soon as tomorrow. Bloomberg's Charles Penty says this comes after lining up enough support in Parliament to stay on as Prime Minister.
In a first vote on Sunday, Sanchez won 166 votes in favour to 165 against, but that wasn't enough to win parliamentary approval for his bid to stay in power. In the second round of voting in Parliament on Tuesday, however, a simple majority will be enough, and while the numbers are very tight indeed, it looks as though Sanchez has the support he needs to launch his government in coalition with the anti-austerity party Podemos. In Madrid, Charles Penty, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrits. This is Bloomberg Anna.
Thanks very much for that, Leanne. Now with your morning sports news, here's William Essler.
Tottenham boss Jose Mourinho says Harry Kane's hamstring injury is as bad as he feared. Lacking their talisman, Spurs could only manage a 1-1 draw with Middlesbrough in the FA Cup third round yesterday. Mourinho feels losing Kane is a big blow to their ambitions. Elsewhere, a youthful Liverpool team reached the fourth round with a 1-0 win over Everton. Chelsea eased to a 2-0 win over Nottingham Forest, but Crystal Palace are out after a 1-0 defeat at home to Derby. Tottenham face a replay following a 1-1 draw at Middlesbrough, while West Ham beat Gillingham 2-0. Tonight, Arsenal face Leeds at the Emirates Stadium after the fourth round draw takes place. England's cricketers are in a very strong position heading into day 4 of the second test with South Africa. They'll resume their second innings on 218 for 4, a lead of 264 runs in Cape Town. Opener Dominic Sibley is on 85 not out, having made his maiden test 50. England need to win the match to keep alive their hopes of a series victory.
Let's have a look now at your week coming up. On Tuesday, we get euro area inflation from, we get the entire euro area inflation reading. And then we also get U.S. factory orders on Tuesday. Plus, Boeing announces its latest order and delivery numbers. Pay close attention to that. Then on Thursday, there's industrial production out of Germany and China's inflation reading for December. Finally, on Friday, it's the granddaddy of all economic statistics. We get the U.S. jobs report. This is Bloomberg.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Something remarkable happens when just the right elements come together. Ideas with technology, data with inspiration, investors with solutions. This is what Invesco does every day, because they believe the possibilities of life and investing are greater when we come together. Invesco. Let's invest in greater possibilities together. To learn more, visit Invesco.com/together. Invesco Distributors, Incorporated.
My mother was always very active and independent, and she was familiar with her neighborhood. But one day, she stopped at the stop sign for much longer than usual. She wasn't even really sure where she was at.
It's important for you to talk to someone about it. I felt so much better after my son told me, Mom, we'll figure it out.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Heidi Stroud-Watts.
Sarah Vakhturi, founder and president of SVB Energy International, joins us now. Sarah, we've seen tensions between the US and Iran previously. They've usually had a pretty short-lived impact on the oil market. Does this feel like a longer-term issue for crude markets to you?
Exactly. I remember we had same discussion the first day that the market opened after the Saudi Aramco attack back in September, and we were discussing, and I mentioned that we don't think this is going to be a long-term or high-risk premium. The reason for that was that at that time, market was clearly understood the magnitude of the disruption in Saudi Arabia and had an approximate estimate of when Saudi production is going to be restored. Whereas this current tension that we're talking about is just the beginning of the game. No one is sure that what would be Iran's retaliation, what would be U.S. responses, and how things are going to affect each other. So what we think is that potentially what we call it Qasem Soleimani's risk premium on oil prices could be something that even could go even higher and stronger than the Saudi attack that we observed in September of last year, and for a longer term.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters here in London, I'm Caroline Hepker with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. So escalating tensions between Iran and the US means risk-off trades this morning. After a strong 2019 rally towards the end of the year, the US stock 600 is down currently 1.2%, led in fact by automakers, lower and chemical companies. In fact, the only sector that is gaining is oil and gas here in Europe. Crude oil extending Friday's gain this this Monday morning. So WTI crude trading at $64.05, up by 1.6%. Brent crude just hovering below that $70 mark, so $69.88, so up by 1.8% this morning. The US State Department warning of a heightened risk of missile attacks near military bases and energy facilities in Saudi Arabia. So that's one of the potential ramifications from this Washington-Tehran face-off. In terms of futures, US stock futures are actually lower right now in terms of where we are. We're down by 0.7% for S&P 500 futures this morning. Gold also surging the most in 6 years. This morning we trade at $1,576 the troy ounce, so up by 1.5%. Goldman Sachs says that gold rallying this year, or sees it rallying this year, well beyond current levels. That's according to a note that was sent out on the 6th of January, so today. As for the bond markets, US bond yields slipping for a third day, and here in Europe we've also seen just some movement. So we're down 2 basis points at 1.77% for benchmark 10-year yields, and we're at negative 30 basis points for German Bund yields, so also down 2.5 basis points this morning. As for the FX space, Bloomberg dollar spot index weaker 0.2%, the British pound stronger 0.3%, and the Japanese yen also higher 0.1%, trading at 107.97. That is Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning.
Good morning, Caroline. In Venezuela, it was a day of political chaos. Security forces barred opposition leader Juan Guaido and his backers from entering the National Assembly. That allowed supporters of President Nicolas Maduro to choose their own assembly president. Guaido and his loyalists went off-site and re-elected him anyway. That drew praise from the US and Europe, which opposed Maduro. More than 2 years after a wave of sexual assault allegations against Harvey Weinstein, the filmmaker is facing the start of a criminal trial today. He's pleaded not guilty and says everything he did was consensual. More than 75 women have come forward publicly to accuse him of sexual misconduct. And Hollywood has kicked off its award season with the Golden Globes. And the World War I epic 1917 was the big winner. The Universal Pictures movie won the prize for Best Drama. Sam Mendes also took home the prize for Best Director. 1917 beat out 3 movies from Netflix: The Irishman, Marriage Stories, and The Two Popes. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg.
Did you watch, Leanne, did you watch the Golden Globes? Did you see Ricky Gervais hosting?
I didn't watch it, but this morning
It's on too late for us. Let's be honest.
Too late, yes. Was he epic?
He was epic. I mean, I don't know how that guy, I think this is his 5th or his 6th year hosting, but he rips into his fellow Hollywood actors, and I don't know how he hangs around LA the next day. I mean, he must be widely despised.
Yeah, maybe. I didn't know you could win awards for films that haven't even been released yet, but that's taught me something new this morning.
Yeah, 1917 isn't even out.
Yeah, there we go. Leanne, thanks very much for the world news update. It is 9:20 in the city, so let's check in with Bloomberg Opinion. And today we do that on the subject of geopolitics and oil. Opinion columnist Julian Lee has been writing about whether crude could become Iran's weapon of choice. Let's get to Julian now. Do you think so, Julian? Is the method of retaliation here going to be hit Iraqi energy infrastructure, or maybe more like Saudi? What is going to be the weapon of choice here by Iran?
I personally think that it will probably avoid attacking oil facilities in the Middle East. I don't think that necessarily serves its interests at the moment. Certainly not in Iraq. I think that Iran Iran has an awful lot of influence in Iraq. We've seen the Iraqi parliament just yesterday vote to press the government to expel US and other foreign troops from Iraqi soil. There's no clear indication yet whether the government will take that line, and President Trump has certainly raised the stakes if they do. But I don't see them attacking Iraqi oil infrastructure. The Saudi infrastructure has been shown in the recent past, to be vulnerable. But I still think that Iran will want to go after something that is much more tangibly American than Saudi oil installations.
But so what does that mean? Are they going to try and just kill American citizens? Will they try and take out a top leader, as the U.S. did? What kind of retaliation do you expect?
I think either of those is certainly a possibility. I wouldn't claim to be, an expert on Iranian military thinking or indeed on the thinking of Soleimani's deputies or the supreme leader of Iran. But I think that they will be looking at something much more in line with what the US has done. I think that US troops, US diplomats are certainly at risk, and they may well seek some kind of attack, whether a cyber attack or something else, in the US itself.
And Julian, in terms of your expertise around the oil industry, we spoke to a guest earlier who makes the point that shutting the Straits of Hormuz is not likely, because if the Iranians were able to do that, because it would anger the Chinese, who the Iranians still export to. Just briefly, is that part of the thinking?
I think that the Strait of Hormuz is much more important to Asian countries these days than it is to the United States. I think it would have a disproportionate effect on Asian buyers and China, most importantly, to Iran, and a much smaller impact these days on the U.S.
Julian, thanks so much for joining us. Bloomberg opinion columnist Julian Lee. You can get his column by typing OPIN GO on the Bloomberg terminal.
Straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak, we'll talk about Carlos Cohn. This is Bloomberg.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report, I'm Michael Barr. The Lee County, Florida School Board has defeated negligence and wrongful death claims stemming from the heat-related death of a high school football player. It was ruled there was no underlying constitutional violation in subjecting him to intense voluntary practice drills during the summer. It was also ruled the family of Zachary Tyler Martin Polsenberg failed to show the coach's conduct did not rise to a conscious, shocking level. Professional Bull Riders is forecasting a 25% bump in sponsorship revenue this season, including deals with new partners that include the gun rights group, the U.S. Concealed Carry Association. PBR Chief Executive Officer Sean Gleason says it's the biggest year-over-year sponsorship jump since Endeavor Group Holdings, the Hollywood talent agency, a business led by Ari Emanuel, bought the circuit in 2015. And that is a Bloomberg Business of Sports Report. I'm Michael Barr. In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Hello, I'm here to tell you that age really does bring wisdom, and you may still have plenty to contribute. At EisnerAmper, we're successful at helping business owners and entrepreneurs assess and plan for the future, as well as maximize where you are in the present. If you're curious about how to plan for both your professional and personal future, come and talk to us. I'm Lisa Stewart, principal in charge of the Center for Family Business Excellence, and I'd love to help you to find the right path forward. You can find us at EisnerAmper.com/family.
This is not a cat. This is not a rocket. And this is not a sail. That's right. At Smarty Mobile, we're not having a sale. While others are slashing prices, we're introducing our best ever new plans. Take our new 30-gig data SIM for just £10 a month. With unlimited calls and texts and no speed restrictions, credit checks or contract tying you down, why shop around? New plans, great value. Now that's Smarty. Grab yours today. Search Smarty Mobile. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
At TradePoint, we get just how busy you are. That's why with a handy range of services to make your life easier. Whether it's cutting timber, matching bricks, or mixing paint, we help you make big jobs smaller. So for all you need, when you need it, get to TradePoint. Restrictions may apply. See tradepoint.co.uk.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We've got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to every NFL game live as it's happening.
LaShawn McCoy has an opening on the right side, punches into the end zone for the touchdown.
Or catch it later on demand.
Offset backs behind Mahomes. The give is to Williams. Starts right, cuts it back to the left, and blows into the end zone for the touchdown.
You call the plays. Follow the NFL anytime, anywhere, all season long with TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB digital radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Good morning from the German capital of Berlin. I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Anna Edwards here in London. It is 9:30 in Berlin with Matt Miller. It is 10:30 in the morning. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. And Matt, a real focus once again on geopolitical tension in the Middle East, leading markets lower, equity markets and risk assets lower here in Europe.
Yes, well, and far less importantly, in this moment, we are getting PMIs out from across Europe and in the UK, and I just
on the back of weak data out of the US, so there is still a focus on the fundamentals.
On the data, I just saw December services PMI pop across my terminal from the UK at a reading of 50, which is, of course, the line between contraction and expansion. The preliminary reading had been 49, so a little bit better than had been anticipated, but still not amazing in terms of the final picture. It is, though, that those geopolitical tensions that are really driving markets down. We see, for example, European equity indexes all down with losses of more than 1%. Even the FTSE is down right now 82 points to 7450. The DAX is one of the biggest losers, down 2% or 260 points to 12,957. So the DAX dropping down in one session in 2 hours, down below 13,000. In terms of the U.S. futures picture, it isn't as bad as the cash trade, but it's getting worse and worse throughout the morning. So now we're seeing Dow, S&P, and NASDAQ futures down about 0.8 to 1%. And then in terms of the risk indicators that you might look at, the yen is now down below 108. So you can buy only 107.9 yen for your dollar, as the Japanese currency, widely considered a safe haven, gains in strength. Investors are buying U.S. 10-year treasuries, pushing the yield down to 1.7742. And, of course, gold at a 6-year high continues to rise, $1,577.55 a troy ounce. Speaking of continuing to rise, oil also up. We see Brent crude, which is, of course, the majority of the crude in the Middle East region is Brent, and it's also the global benchmark at $69.73 a barrel. But you also see West Texas Intermediate gaining, trading on the NYMEX, up 86 cents a barrel to 63.91.
Interesting. You mentioned the UK data, Matt, and I saw that the pound is stronger by 0.3%. And in fact, that was half an hour before that data broke. So interesting that we saw the market taking such a positive position on the pound just half an hour ago, and then we got that better than expected PMI number. Let's get to a totally different story right now, though, Matt, and one I know that we're going to be following increasingly as we go through this week. We are getting more details about Carlos Ghosn's escape from Japan. According to Japanese broadcaster NHK, airport inspectors skipped X-ray checks on large cases before they were loaded onto a private jet. Police reportedly suspect that Ghosn was hidden in one of them. For more, let's go live to Beirut, where Bloomberg's Matthew Campbell is standing by. I mean, if this were a film script, you'd be skeptical of its plausibility or its believability, wouldn't you, Matthew? Some of the details that seem to emerge are incredible. And I guess in the short term, we are going to be looking for further details from Carlos Ghosn this week about just how he managed to escape.
Indeed, Anna, though I suspect he will be quite reticent to discuss the details of how he managed to slip out of Japan, given that there are certainly risks of criminal liability to some of the people who helped him. I think he will be looking this week to move the narrative forward toward his effort to discredit, attack the Japanese charges against him, and to work toward clearing his name, which he believes he will eventually do.
We did see, there was a great story over the weekend. I thought Zeke Foe worked on it, but I know that Dana Kreisch worked on it as well out of Beirut, showing that he had help from a Green Beret and another American, two Americans that had close ties to Lebanon, and it's pretty amazing, actually. I wonder if he's going to say anything. I don't doubt your assertion that he probably won't want to say anything about how he got out, Matt. But I wonder if he'll say anything about, who took him down at Nissan and why. I mean, he's always asserted that this is a smear campaign, and that he's the scapegoat here. What do you think we're going to hear?
Well, Matt, I think we are going to hear some of that. There are some scores. I suspect that Carlos Ghosn is going to want to settle against some of the people at Nissan he believes are responsible for what's happened to him. This, of course, goes into his plans to more closely integrate Nissan with Renault, perhaps as part of one giant global company, which were quite advanced at the time of his arrest. So I think we are going to hear about that and what he views as the genesis of this investigation against him, which he has consistently said was essentially ginned up to take him off the board rather than the result of any genuine wrongdoing on his part.
Yeah, he has often seemed to suggest, hasn't he, or said that this is a plot to stop a foreigner merging Renault and Nissan. So we'll see if he sheds any more light on that. What is his ultimate plan, though, do you think, Matthew? Is this, if he is going to stand trial somewhere, do we have any sense of where that might be? I note that a member of Macron's top team saying that he does have to face justice somewhere.
Well, I think we are going to hear a little bit about that. One theory that has been going around, in some cases from people representing Ghosn himself, is that he could be tried in Lebanon, and that would be a scenario, I guess, in which Japanese prosecutors would turn over their evidence, turn over their files to a team of Lebanese prosecutors, and Ghosn would then seek an innocent verdict on these trials and on these charges in a Lebanese court. I think it's safe to say that is not a scenario that would be acceptable to the Japanese government, to the Japanese criminal justice apparatus. But I think Carlos Ghosn realizes that he can't just do nothing about these charges hanging over him. He does have to seek to address them in some way.
That's what I don't understand. Why can't he just pull a Mark Rich and just stay in Lebanon for the rest of his life, basically?
Well, indeed, and there's a somewhat more unsavory comparison, which is Roman Polanski, who has lived for a very long time openly in France with the odd legal headache, perhaps, after having fled imprisonment in the U.S. in the 1970s. So, look, it's not long-term life as a fugitive is not impossible, but I don't think that's what Cohn is looking for here. I think he is looking for legal vindication and a chance to knock down these allegations, which have so transformed his public standing.
Matthew, thanks so much for joining us. Bloomberg's Matthew Campbell, live from Beirut as we gear up to a fascinating week in Beirut and coverage of Carlos Ghosn's press conference.
Let's get over now to Leanne Gerrans for the global news headlines. Leanne?
Good morning, Matt. China is signaling it wants to restore law and order in Hong Kong after 7 months of unrest. It's named a party official described as a strongman as its new top official in the city. Liu Weinin has no experience in Hong Kong. In his most recent job, he enforced a regional campaign to end corruption and purge disloyal officials. Now to Australia. Exhausted firefighters welcomed cooler weather and patchy rain in the blazed-ravaged country, even as authorities warn of a return to dangerous conditions later this week. The national death toll since the fires began has now risen to 24. Bloomberg's Jason Scott reports.
With no end in sight to the crisis, authorities are counting the cost after the weekend saw properties in New South Wales and Victoria states razed by fires that grew so large they generated dry thunderstorms. Thousands of people have been evacuated to recreation grounds converted into makeshift camps that are shrouded in toxic smoke. In Canberra, Jason Scott, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
A mysterious pneumonia outbreak has hospitalized 59 people in the central Chinese city of Wuhan, according to authorities. Bloomberg's Jason Gale reports.
7 are in serious condition. The tally is up from 44 cases Friday. Doctors are yet to pinpoint the cause, but have ruled out pathogens including influenza and SARS, and say there is no clear sign of human-to-human transmission or that medical workers have been infected. In Melbourne, Jason Gale, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And British talent won a host of awards at the Golden Globes on Sunday night. Fleabag writer and star Phoebe Waller-Bridge won Best Actress in a TV Comedy, while the sitcom was named Best TV Series. Waller-Bridge paid tribute to her co-star Andrew Scott. Best Actress in a TV Drama went to Olivia Colman for her portrayal of Queen Elizabeth in The Crown. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Anna.
Leanne, thank you very much. Fleabag, just fabulous. Right, coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, President Trump warns of major retaliation if Iran does anything to avenge the killing of Qasem Soleimani. Tehran says it's now abandoning the 2015 nuclear deal. We have all the latest news flow from the Middle East. That's coming up next. This is Bloomberg.
My name is Hunter Hayes. I know myself, and I know my buzzed warning signs. One shot is about knowing my limits, or not necessarily knowing my limits.
I start with one shot to have a good time.
One of the signs that I'm starting to feel a little buzz is when I start solving not only my own problems, but the entire world's problems. When I know I'm going out, I know I'm going to start with calling for a ride. Buzz driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
More than just a game, baseball is big business. For the chief revenue officer of the New York Mets, this means overseeing complex operations, key financial drivers, and interpreting data to make critical decisions every day.
How is your business managing complexity? Cohn Resnick can help you improve performance through an integrated business planning strategy that optimizes your data, streamlines processes, and keeps you ahead of the competition. Explore more at cohnresnick.com/MLB. Cohn Resnick, Advisory Assurance Tax. Transform your game.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Boredom, fitness enemy number one. So don't just run. Run. Mix it up. Skip. Run. Skip. Run. Give yourself a lift. Mix it up. Lift. Mix it up. Run. Lift. Splash. Skip. Lift. Run. It's crunch time. Skip. Mix it up. Run. Mix it up. Add a boxing class. Skip. Run. Splash. Skip. Run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing in January. T's and C's apply. Run. Mix it up. Skip. Mix it. Run. Mix it.
Do you go on the same holiday every year? To the same country, in the same hotel, with the same sea view, visit the same ancient monuments, lay by the same dolphin-shaped pool, meet the same Barrys and Sandras, and wear the same Hawaiian shirt that you'd never wear at home? Then maybe it's time to switch it up. Starting with the all-new Vauxhall Corsa, with its bold styling and up to 70 miles per gallon. To switch it up, visit your local Vauxhall dealership or search New Corsa. Official WLTP test figures for comparison purposes only. Real-world figures may vary.
You don't just live in one room, so why should you Wi-Fi? With Sky Broadband's Wi-Fi guarantee, you'll get Wi-Fi in every room or money back. Perfect for food shopping in the bedroom, gaming in your PJs in the lounge, or streaming sci-fi movies in the kitchen. Get Sky's super-fast broadband and Wi-Fi guarantee. £32 a month for 18 months with $19.95 setup. Click on the banner now.
Sky Fibre Areas, Sky Kit required. Refund on boost component of subscription paid during current minimum term up to date of claim. Minimum 3 megabits per second or money back. Prices may change during minimum term. See sky.com/guarantee.
Hello, I'm Nat Coombs from ESPN's The Nat Coombs Show, which admittedly is 1 out of 10 for original podcast name, but 10 out of 10 for NFL chat. Every week, we're dropping 4 episodes with an all-pro lineup of terrific guests, journalists, comedians, players, coaches, you name it, all getting you up to speed with everything gridiron. The Nat Coombs Show, American football, British accent. Add to your favorites and listen on TuneIn.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour, but we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium...
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats...
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed... When you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen and favorite ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
You might already know that TuneIn allows you to listen to all the pro sports leagues wherever you go. But did you know TuneIn is also home to the wide world of college sports?
Open 3, DeAndre Hunter got it! Hand off Carruthers, big hole right side. He leaps and he surges in, touchdown!
From live college football, basketball, and baseball games to podcasts and coaches shows fueling your love for the game in your school. And the best part is, it's all free. Search college sports to find your team or league.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters here in London, I'm Caroline Hepker with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. So we're down by 1.2% on the Euro Stoxx 600 this morning after a strong rally towards the end of 2019. We're lower as the escalating tensions between Iran and the US mean basically risk-off trades across the market. Only oil stocks actually are gaining in Europe. That's because we see WTI and Brent crude both jumping. We're up by 1.8% on Brent crude, although we're just hovering below that $70 a barrel mark that we did see earlier this morning. We currently trade at 69.82. In terms of other things that we've been looking at in Europe, European auto stocks, one of the worst performers this Monday. UK car sales dropping for a third year, according to the SMMT. But a little bright hope for Europe, which is the gauge of private sector activity in services by IHS Markit. That showed services edging a little bit higher in December, so some positivity, but really the focus is around this Washington-Tehran tension effectively for most of the markets. Gold also surging this morning, trading up 1.6% right now at 1,577. In terms of the bond markets this morning, we're back really to a full week after the New Year holidays last week in Europe. We trade at negative 29 basis points for German bond yields, down by 1.5 basis points, and US yields also drop a basis point at 1.77%. This as the FX market, some muted reaction, more muted reaction in this part of the market to the Middle Eastern worries. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index drops 0.25%. The British Pound jumps 0.5%. The Euro also stronger, 0.25%. The Japanese Yen also higher at 107.99. That is Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning.
Good morning, Caroline. Strikes against French President Emmanuel Macron's proposed pension reform are entering their second month with no clear end in sight. That's as unions prepare for 2 more days of street protests, with some planning more radical action. The Prime Minister will start another round of discussions with union representatives tomorrow. Macron has already made unpopular changes to taxes, labour laws and the welfare system. More than 2 years after a wave of sexual assault allegations against Harvey Weinstein, the filmmaker is starting the first of his criminal trial today. He's pleaded not guilty and says everything he did was consensual. More than 75 women have come forward publicly to accuse him of sexual misconduct. And finally, top bosses are expected to have already made the equivalent of the average worker's annual wage by 5 p.m. today. A study shows a typical FTSE 100 chief executive earns around £900 an hour compared to a UK-wide average of £14. 2020 will be the first year that publicly listed firms will have to explain pay levels of bosses. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on QuickTake by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Matt.
You know, the owners are the ones who decide the pay, right? I mean, shareholders can change that if they want.
But isn't it amazing that by 5 p.m. today they've earned £29,000, which is the average wage?
Well, you know what Mark Twain says about statistics.
No, tell me, because I don't.
Well, I can't. I can tell you, he says they're lies, and...
more lies.
Yes, exactly. With more colorful language. I mean, the bottom line is shareholders decide what to pay their CEOs, and if they want to pay...
The political backdrop to this story in the UK, there's been certain politicians have been suggesting that you need to intervene in the market to balance out pay a little bit more and to set limits on the difference between average pay and CEO.
Those politicians will go on to careers in the private sector, earning more than the top FTSE CEOs. So, in any case, let's get over to Nathan Hager, who's prepping for daybreak in New York. Nathan, what do you got ahead for us?
Well, worsening tensions between the U.S. and Iran, Matt, continue to be the focus for global markets, with risk-off sentiment that began on Friday extending into this morning. We're going to bring you all the latest developments between the U.S. and Iran and talk about the market reaction with CCLA's Chief Investment Officer, James Bevan. We'll also bring in Greg Valliere of AGF Investments, the Chief U.S. Policy Advisor there, to talk about the political impact of these rising Middle East tensions. Plus, this was going to be a busy week anyway, with the December jobs report due out Friday, and Carlos Ghosn planning that news conference this week after his escape from Japan. We're going to get into all that in our weekly roundtable with Bloomberg News editors around the world. So join me and Karen Moscow for all that coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak. Matt.
Looking forward to it, Nathan. Bloomberg Daybreak is up next with Nathan and Karen. If you're listening on London DAB digital radio, though, you will hear Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Francine Lacroix.
Now, let's talk about the latest geopolitical developments. President Trump is threatening Iran with major retaliation if the country does anything to avenge the U.S. killing of top military general Qasem Soleimani. Tehran has already said it will no longer be bound by the 2015 nuclear deal on enrichment of uranium. Joining us now, Bloomberg reporter Simone Foxman, who joins us from Doha with reaction from the Middle East, and also with us here in the studio in London, Bloomberg's executive editor for energy and commodities, Will Kennedy. Simone, let's come to you first. So what have the latest developments been in terms of the escalation or potential for escalation here? Iran has said it's not going to be bound by the nuclear deal, which is going to be part of the focus.
Absolutely, and we were paying a lot of attention to that Iraq vote, the push to expel U.S. troops there. But I'm looking at these pictures from the funeral for Qasem Soleimani, and just really astounded by how many people there are in the street. We also are watching the U.S.-led coalition had to suspend operations against Islamic State in order to defend its current installations. And then we're watching for other things like rhetoric from Hezbollah, who the leader of which spoke yesterday, encouraging essentially attacks against U.S. troops around the region. So we're going to see more of that potentially as we move forward in this heightened risk environment.
Will, what about the oil price? How much further can we expect oil to climb? And how concerned are traders that the retaliation from Iran will come in the form of an attack on major oil facilities?
Clearly, they're very alive to that risk. If we think back to last year, Matt, we saw both attacks on shipping in the Persian Gulf and, of course, the missile attack, which the US blamed on Iran, on the Abqaiq facility in Saudi Arabia, which knocked out 5% of global oil capacity. So that risk is definitely there, but I think the market's in a place where it's priced in a fair amount of risk premium, but now it's going to be looking for something to actually happen, and there's probably a risk that unless we get some sort of more, to use a modern buzzword, kinetic action from Iran in the next few days, that we might see prices start to fall back again. One point that I would make is that if you compare today's crisis to crisis in the region 20 years ago, there's one very big difference. We have shale now. For every dollar that we put on the oil price, that's going to elicit some kind of supply response from Texas, more drilling, more U.S. exports, and we saw U.S. exports reach an astonishing 4.6 million barrels a day last week. So the global oil market has a sort of inbuilt stabilization mechanism which wasn't there in previous years.
And Will, how long does it take that to come to the market then, the shale oil? Because we've been talking about whether oil is going to be at the heart of the retaliatory efforts by the Iranians, and there seems to be some skepticism as to whether it will be, because Saudi and Iraqi oil assets might not be American enough now because of shale, and indeed any action in the Straits of Hormuz might take its toll on clients and customers in Asia rather than on the US. So how do you see oil playing the role here? And do tell me, how quickly can shale come in?
I mean, I think shale can come back in. It's not immediate, but I think that it's much more flexible than most oil production. So it's a question of weeks and months. But moreover, the market will take its cue from any action that it does see. And that will both be in the form of shale producers hedging their forward production, which will give them room to do more drilling this year, and putting those rigs to work. So even if the oil doesn't come for a few weeks or even a few months, the market's able to take its cue from signals now. In terms of retaliation, I think you make some very good points, but we just don't know at the end of the day. What we do know is Iran has been willing to use oil as a weapon to assert itself in the past. Again, but going back to the political place where we started, I think there will be a lot of focus on Iraq. Iraq is at the center of this crisis. We're seeing some big political repercussions. One danger for the oil market is that chaos spirals, and then you get a real impact in a country that's producing more than 5 million barrels a day.
Simone, I was listening to, I think General Petraeus over the weekend was saying that he thinks that this was a good move in the long run, but in the short run, the risk of war is much higher. What is President Trump's strategy here? Have we learned anything about that?
I think that, I don't know if we've reasoned it out completely, but certainly seems to be more aggressive. Definitely a shift from the de-escalation policy that the U.S. government seemed to be going down previously. And now I think I heard one analyst put it as though his policy is no one is safe in the Iran regime. And I think eventually the idea would be to drive the Iranian government to the table.
Simone, I apologise, have to jump in. Bloomberg reporter Simone Foxman and also Will Kennedy here in
Portfolio and boredom, fitness enemy number one. So don't just run. Mix it up, skip, run. Give yourself a lift, mix it up, lift, mix it up, run, lift, splash, skip, lift, run. It's crunch time. Skip, mix it up, run, mix it up. Add a boxing class. Skip, run, splash, skip, run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing in January. T's and C's apply. Run, mix it up, skip, mix it, run, mix it.
When it comes to music, I've heard it all. Pink Floyd, Sean Paul, Slipknot. But in the Which Test Lab, hearing isn't enough. When we test headphones, we really listen. Not just to the music, but to the stuff that gets in the way. The traffic, the chatter, all that. Mind the gap. We simulate the loudest commute to find you the headphones that cancel out the noise. So you know we're only recommending the best.
Which tests harder so you can buy smarter. Visit which.co.uk. Missing those moments at family meals?
Who's up for seconds?
Oh, yes, please.
Filter out background noise and turn up the things you love. For less, with up to 15% off Boots Hearing Care's best-selling hearing aids. Plus, spread the cost with interest-free monthly payments. Boots, let's feel good. Offer ends 31st of January 2020. Interest-free is subject to status. Over 18s only. Terms and conditions apply. Phonak Marvel Hearing Aids only.
Financial capital of the world. 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Monday, January 6, 2020. Coming up this hour.
Global stocks fall as tensions with Iran escalate.
Tehran threatens retaliation and abandons the 2015 nuclear accord.
Iraq seeks to remove American troops and the U.S. suspends its fight against Islamic State.
Oil gains, the yen strengthens, and gold hits a 6-year high.
Lawmakers and politicians react to the Iran airstrike, plus Harvey Weinstein goes on trial this week for sex crimes. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stanshauer in sports. NFL's wild card weekend ended with the NFC and road wins by the Vikings and Seahawks. NBA, the Knicks lost to the Clippers.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
And good Monday morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and U.S. futures are following global stocks lower as the fallout continues from the U.S. airstrike that killed a powerful Iranian general. We'll have more on that in a moment, but first, 5:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are down 22 points this morning. Dow futures down 187, and NASDAQ futures down 72. The DAX in Germany down 1.8%, CAC in Paris down 1.3%, and the FTSE 100 is down 1.1%. Nikkei 225 in Japan fell 1.9%, and the Hang Seng in Hong Kong down 0.8%. 10-year Treasury up 2/32, yield 1.77%. Yield on the 2-year 1.52%. NYMEX crude oil up 1 1/3% or 85 cents at $63.90 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 1.8% or $27.10 to $15.79.50 an ounce. The euro 1.1194 against the dollar. The yen at 107.98. Nathan.
And Karen, tensions between the U.S. and Iran are getting hotter. Tehran is threatening retaliation over the killing of its top general. It's also abandoning limits on uranium enrichment. Meanwhile, in Iraq, the government is looking to expel American forces. We get the very latest now from Bloomberg International editor Jody Schneider.
We have calls for reprisal from the region, that there be attacks on U.S. assets and U.S. service people in the region. We've seen the Iraq parliament actually vote that the U.S. remove its troops from that country. And on the Iranian side, we've heard from them in terms of the Iran nuclear agreement, the 2015 agreement, that they will no longer abide by a key part of that agreement, which is that they no longer enrich uranium.
The killing of Qasem Soleimani is appearing to unite Iranians, with thousands turning out to mourn the general over the weekend.
As Iran threatens retaliation and Iraq seeks the removal of U.S. troops, President Trump is issuing threats of his own to both nations. Here with details is Bloomberg's Derek Wahlbank.
Donald Trump put it in very stark terms that if Iran does anything, the U.S. will retaliate. He said he reserves the right to retaliate disproportionately. The other one that adds new risk that we hadn't necessarily seen before is following the Iraq vote. President Trump threatened to sanction the U.S. ally Iraq if they kicked out U.S. forces and did not reimburse for costs spent on base construction, which is billions of U.S. dollars, billions plural of U.S. dollars.
The U.S.-led fight against Islamic State is being suspended in Iraq as forces instead focus on protecting bases that have recently come under attack.
Tension in the region has oil prices spiking again today. Bob McNally is president of Rapidan Energy Advisors.
Our assessment is that the odds of an overt U.S. military conflict with Iran went from about 5% to about 25%. And we think crude has some more risk pricing to do. At the end of the day, we think we'll avoid a war because both President Trump and the Iranian leadership wish to do so. Neither side wants to go into a full-on military conflict.
Checking oil prices now. West Texas Intermediate's up 1.3% or 85 cents at $63.90 a barrel. Brent, the international benchmark, is near $70 a barrel. Right now it's $69.70. That's a gain of 1.6%.
Meantime, in Europe, leaders are scrambling to work out what they can do about tensions between the U.S. and Iran. We get details now from Bloomberg's Sebastian Salek, who joins us live from London. Good morning, Sebastian.
Good morning, Karen and Nathan. The U.S. killing of a top Iranian general was more than just a shock for the EU. It was a disaster. The bloc has been fighting an increasingly desperate and lowly campaign to keep the 2015 Iran nuclear accord together ever since President Trump pulled out in 2018. The fruit of more than a decade of diplomatic efforts by France, Germany and the UK was laid to waste on Sunday when Iran said it no longer considers itself bound by its international obligations to restrict the enrichment of uranium. Leaders of the three countries issued a statement on Sunday saying they urged Iran to reverse all measures inconsistent with the deal. Live in London, I'm Sebastian Salek, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Sebastian, thanks. Risk-off sentiment is widespread in global markets. The move lower for equities started immediately when trading opened in Asia. Bloomberg's Juliet Sally joins us from Singapore with details. Good morning, Juliet.
Good morning, Nathan and Karen. A drive to safe havens like the yen saw the Nikkei 225 have its biggest one-day fall since early October, closing lower by almost 2%. Dollar yen dropped to mid-107 levels intraday, bearishly breaching the 108 to 110 range that it's held since mid-October. Elsewhere, a positive read on China's economy with the Taishan December services PMI holding up in expansionary territory wasn't enough to boost sentiment on the mainland. The CSI 300 closed down 0.4% in Singapore. Juliet Sarli, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Juliet, thank you. The question for markets now is what comes next? Kokyu Agubloa is head of flow strategy at Societe Generale.
If you look at the track record in sort of 2019 when it came to North Korea and the crisis, we have learned that reacting too quickly to this sort of geopolitical risk could be quite damaging for portfolio investment returns. So I think Safe Haven have reacted the way they should, but I think that it will be very difficult to see a complete sort of debacle in terms of war, simply because Iran will have a lot more to lose, and therefore I think there might be more subtle retaliation over a longer period of time as opposed to a tit-for-tat type situation.
And gold is seeing a big boost from the ramped-up tension, hitting the highest level since 2013. Right now, spot gold is trading at $1,576.27 an ounce. S&P futures are down 21 points, Dow futures down 181, and NASDAQ futures down 67. The 10-year Treasury up 3/30 seconds, yield 1.77%. Straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news, and this is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thanks a lot. 5:07 now on Wall Street. Let's check in with Michael Barr to see what else is going on around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. Lawmakers and politicians are reacting to the U.S. drone strike against top Iranian military leader Qasem Soleimani. At a campaign event in Davenport, Iowa last night, former Vice President Joe Biden reacted to President Trump's Twitter activity over the weekend, including his official notice to Congress that the U.S. will take retaliatory action if Iran strikes any American person, interest, or target.
No president has the right to take the nation to war without the informed consent and authority coming from the United States Congress. But he thinks he can do it by having formally told the world in a tweet.
Fellow Democratic presidential candidate Elizabeth Warren questioned the timing of the airstrike, saying people wonder whether it was a bid to distract from President Trump's impeachment. Meanwhile, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham defended the U.S. drone strike in Iraq, saying, "I'm glad he's dead. I'm glad we finally got a president who understands Iran is the cancer of the Middle East, and they must change the status quo." Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he has spoken with President Trump and leaders of France and Germany about the U.S. airstrike. Johnson says we will not lament his death, but it calls for de-escalation from all sides. That was echoed by British Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab speaking to Sky News.
We want to see Iranian behaviour improve, and there is an opportunity, if the leadership in Tehran take it, to actually move from the heightened tensions to a more positive track.
Al-Shabaab extremists overran a key military base used by U.S. counter-terror forces in Kenya before dawn Sunday. 3 American Department of Defense personnel were killed, and several U.S. aircraft and vehicles were destroyed before the extremists were repelled. 5 people were killed and at least 60 more injured during a deadly pileup on a Pennsylvania highway Sunday morning outside of Pittsburgh. Multiple vehicles were involved in the crash, including 3 tractor-trailers and a tour bus out of Rockaway, New Jersey. NTSB member Jennifer Hammondy.
There are reports that the bus was heading from Rockaway in New Jersey to Cincinnati, Ohio, but that is information that we need to confirm.
Hammondy would not say whether snow was a factor in the crash. Disgraced movie producer Harvey Weinstein goes on trial this week in New York, where he's charged with 5 sex crimes. He has pleaded not guilty. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thanks for coming up to 5:10 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John Stashauer.
Nathan, a wild card weekend. 3 wins by road teams, which also happened last year. 2 games went overtime. The 2 6 seeds both won by beating Tom Brady and Drew Brees, the 2 40-year-old quarterbacks who have the 2 most touchdown passes in NFL history. Brees and the Saints came from 10 down to force overtime, but the Vikings won the coin flip. Long Kirk Cousins pass to Adam Thielen set him up for the game winner.
Cousins from the gun. 3rd and goal at the 4. Kirk Cousins play action, floats it for Rudolph, back left corner of the end zone, leaping 2-hand grab for the touchdown. And the Minnesota Vikings have shocked the New Orleans Saints in overtime. Grab, 26-20.
Westwood One had it third year in a row. New Orleans season has ended on the final play of the game. Also happened in overtime last year, 2 seasons ago. It was also versus Minnesota. The other NFC games saw Seattle win 17-9 in Philadelphia. The Eagles battled through injuries. Most of Carson Wentz's weapons got hurt, and then he got hurt in the first quarter. Banged heads with Jadeveon Clowney, left with a head injury, and in Wentz's first playoff game, he had been out the previous 2 Eagles postseasons. His coach is Doug Peterson.
I'm disappointed, for him, because I wanted this for him, obviously, and I think a lot of his teammates did too, and the organization did. I mean, he's battled through a lot, but we'll learn from it. We'll move on.
4 wild card winners move on to the divisional round next weekend. Knicks in L.A. scored 45 points in the first quarter, gave up 47 in the second, fell short against the Clippers 135-132. St. John's lost to Xavier 75-67. With the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashower. Nathan?
All right, John, thanks. S&P futures lower by 19 points. Dow futures down 167. NASDAQ futures lower by 64 points. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
This ain't just lunch. It's the KFC fill-up lunch for $1.99. It's mighty fine. Tingles your spine, so jump in line because it's time to dine on a mini fillet burger, 2 hot wings and fries, all for a fist-pumping $1.99. What the... The KFC fill-up lunch every day until 3 p.m. At participating restaurants every day from 2nd to 26th of January until 3 p.m. only, subject to availability.
Ah, Socrates, solved the hearing aid paradox yet?
No, Plato, I still don't understand how a sale of tiny hearing aids can also be massive.
It's simple relativity.
Oh, shut up, Albert.
But it's true. Specsavers have tiny hearing aids with advanced Bluetooth technology, and now you can save a massive £400 on selected hearing aids, like a mouse relative to an elephant, yeah?
A mouse?
The hearing aid sale at Specsavers. Tiny hearing aids, massive savings. Terms and conditions apply. Sale ends 31st of January. Ask in store for details.
At TradePoint, you can get your building essentials at low prices, all in one place, making big jobs smaller. Like 25 kilogram Thistle multi-finish plaster for only £6.74. For all you need, when you need it. Get to TradePoint or go to tradepoint.co.uk.
You might already know that TuneIn allows you to listen to all the pro sports leagues wherever you go. But did you know TuneIn is also home to the wide world of college sports?
Open 3, DeAndre Hunter got it! Handoff Carruthers, big hole right side. He leaps and he surges in. Touchdown!
From live college football, basketball, and baseball games to podcasts and coaches shows fueling your love for the game in your school. And the best part is, it's all free. Search college sports to find your team or league.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Heidi Stroud-Watts.
Sarah Vakhturi, founder and president of SVB Energy International, joins us now. Sarah, we've seen tensions between the US and Iran previously. They've usually had a pretty short-lived impact on the oil market. Does this feel like a longer-term issue for crude markets to you?
Exactly. I remember we had some same discussion the first day that the market opened after the Saudi Aramco attack back in September, and we were discussing, and I mentioned that we don't think this is going to be a long-term or high-risk premium. The reason for that was that at that time, market was clearly understood the magnitude of the disruption in Saudi Arabia and had an approximate estimate of when Saudi production is going to be restored. Whereas this current tension that we're talking about is just the beginning of the game. No one is sure that what would be Iran's retaliation, what would be U.S. responses, and how things are going to affect each other. So what we think is that potentially what we call it Qasem Soleimani's risk premium on oil prices could be something that even could go even higher and stronger than the Saudi attack that we observed in September of last year, and for a longer term.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Stocks are extending their losses and oil is building on gains as investors continue to grapple with the fallout from a U.S. airstrike that killed a powerful Iranian general. Havens are climbing with gold surging to the highest in more than 6 years. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are down almost 19 points. Dow futures down 162 and NASDAQ futures down 62. The DAX in Germany's down 1.6%. 10-year Treasury up 230 seconds, yield 1.78%, and the yield on the 2-year at 1.52%. NYMEX crude oil is up 1.3% or 80 cents at $63.84 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 1.7% or $25.70 at $15.78.10 an ounce. The euro 1.1195 against the dollar. The British pound is at 1.3157 and the yen 108.03. And Bloomberg News has learned that Chinese trade delegation plans to sign the first phase of its trade deal with the U.S. in Washington on January 15th. And milk producer Borden has filed for bankruptcy. The company, which was founded more than 160 years ago, has been hurt by rising milk prices and competition from almond, rice, and soy milk. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. President Trump insisted that Iranian cultural sites were fair game for the U.S. military, dismissing concerns within his own administration that doing so could constitute a war crime under international law. He also warned Iraq that he would levy punishing sanctions if it expelled American troops in retaliation for a U.S. airstrike in Baghdad that killed a top Iranian official. Trump's comments came amid escalating tensions in the Middle East following the killing of General Qasem Soleimani, the head of Iran's elite Quds force. Iran has vowed to retaliate, and Iraq's parliament voted to oust U.S. troops based in the country. In the NFL's wild card playoffs, the Seahawks beat the Eagles 17-9 to advance to the divisional round. The Vikings eliminated the Saints in overtime 26-20. In the NBA, the Knicks lost. In the NHL, the Capitals won. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. We're coming up to 5:20 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak as we continue to watch the global market sell-off following rising tensions between the U.S. and Iran. We're joined by James Bevan, Chief Investment Officer at CCLA. Good morning, James. I wonder what levels you think stocks could test now if tensions with Iran continue to worsen.
Well, I certainly anticipate that we could see another correction, but my expectation
expectation is that if this is correction, it would be the 66th correction that we've had since the S&P 500 began its bull run in early 2009. My expectation is that that would then give way to another charge higher. And for me, actually, that's good news, because the concern that I've had for this year has been far more that equities would get well ahead of themselves. If we had a melt up, we would then likely generate the risks of a meltdown. So correction could be seen as good news.
How deep do you think that correction could go in the short term?
I would say that we could see a pullback of up to 10 percentage points of value, but for me that represents a buying opportunity rather than a harbinger of worse things to follow.
Buying opportunity where specifically, do you think? What are the most appealing assets for you?
Well, for me, it's about equities, and I would say that U.S. equities remain extremely well placed. People say that they are expensive, but actually, if we would look at the median valuations, we'd look at the valuations relative to free cash flow and cash flow growth. My expectation is that the U.S. is well placed. I am absolutely focusing on the admix of quality and secular growth rather than cyclical growth. I think this is going to be a year of relatively modest global economic growth, but continued low inflation and therefore, by extension, low money rates.
So then, if tensions persist with Iran, do you see that changing your view in any way?
I think that we are used to the concept of geopolitical risks affecting sentiment substantially, but not necessarily having an impact on real corporate earnings. For me, the bigger challenges have been whether or not we move forward to a second round agreement between the US and China on trade, whether the Brexit deal, where we have to find a lasting relationship with the EU, can be sorted within the current calendar year, in line with Prime Minister Johnson's expectations and hopes, and indeed whether the European economy itself can move forward on the back of a revival in consumer confidence. Those things seem to me far more important for markets, unless we see the development into a hot war that engulfs the Middle East. And I would put a low probability on that outcome, simply because Iran now knows absolutely that the US has resolve, and it absolutely knows it has military capability.
When you talk about the European economy, what are your prospects for the European economy, given the backdrop that we've seen over the last several months with manufacturing worsening and potential trade tensions with the U.S.?
Yes, interestingly, I would say that the European banking system remains parlous, and that's a big challenge. But the European consumer is looking much more perky than many had anticipated. So I would suggest that if one can find good quality investments that are associated with high quality consumption, particularly with a global footprint, companies like LVMH, for example, those sorts of companies look set to offer strong long-term returns from current levels.
Is it difficult to find quality in Europe given the interest rate backdrop, negative yields we've seen over the last few months?
Negative yields are exceptionally bad news for the banking sector, but I would say that in Europe, one of the biggest challenges, interestingly, are deteriorating demographics. So Germany, for example, has an aging population. It's very hard for economies to grow when the number of people who work in that economy shrinks back. And this comes, of course, at a time when Europeans are unwilling to accept significant immigration, which would be one of the ways to solve the demographic problems.
Thanks for this, James. As always, good talking to you. That's James Bevan, Chief Investment Officer at CCLA, as we continue to watch the market sell off on tensions with Iran. S&P futures are lower by 19 points now. Dow futures down 168. NASDAQ futures lower by just about 64 points now, adding to the losses we saw on Friday. The 10-year is up 1/32, yield 1.78%. The yield on a 2-year Treasury, 1.52%. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Wall Street is headed for a drop at the open to kick off the first full week of 2020. Investors are on edge about rising tensions in the Middle East. Dow futures down 176 points. And you may see prices rising at the pump as oil continues to build on its gains, up more than 1% today at about $64 a barrel. The world's biggest tech companies head to Las Vegas this week for the annual Consumer Electronics Show. Even Apple is making a rare official appearance. Dairy producer Borden has been producing milk since 1857. It will continue to do so for now, but will work on reorganizing the business after filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Conventional milk producers have struggled amid rising milk prices and competition from almond, rice, and soy milk. Borden becomes the second major dairy producer to file for bankruptcy. Larger rival Dean Foods did so less than 2 months ago. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com. And feel the power. Member FINRA, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com/.
Boredom, fitness enemy #1. So don't just run. Run, run. Mix it up. Skip, run, skip, run. Give yourself a lift. Mix it up. Lift. Mix it up. Run, lift, splash, skip, lift, run. It's crunch time. Skip, mix it up. Run, mix it up. Add a boxing class. Skip, run, splash, skip, run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing in January. T's and C's apply. Run, mix it up, skip, mix it, run. Mix it.
How can it be fair that millions of people in the world are denied access to clean water? At WaterAid, we need your help to create an equal world. Whether you're from Morden or Madagascar, everyone, everywhere should have access to clean water. Because clean water changes lives. You can help WaterAid change the picture. To find out how, search WaterAid Radio now.
Martin here loves being his own boss, but staying on top of all the tax rules used to drive him up the stud wall. This 31st of January self-assessment deadline, however, Martin won't be hitting the roof. Just a few buttons. He's using QuickBooks Self-Employed to make sure his tax bill is all above board. It tracks income and expenses, so he always knows what he owes. You could say he smashed it.
Visit quickbooks.co.uk for details. Intuit QuickBooks.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit tunein.com/premium to upgrade.
Hello, I'm Nat Coombs from ESPN's The Nat Coombs Show, which admittedly is 1 out of 10 for original podcast name, but 10 out of 10 for NFL chat. Every week, we're dropping 4 episodes with an all-pro lineup of terrific guests, journalists, comedians, players, coaches, you name it, all getting you up to speed with everything gridiron. The Nat Coombs Show, American football, British accent. Add to your favorites and listen on TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught, it is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
It's 5:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We are just about 4 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. Stocks are tumbling around the world as the fallout continues from the U.S. airstrike that killed a powerful Iranian general. We have several new developments covering threats of retaliation, Iran's nuclear ambitions, and U.S. troops in Iraq. Here are the details is Bloomberg Daybreak editor Brian Fowler.
We'll start with Tehran declaring that it will not abide by any limits on its uranium enrichment operations. And then we've got Iraq's parliament voting to oust U.S. forces from that country. And then we've got President Donald Trump. He warns Iran of, quote, disproportionate U.S. retaliation for any sort of military action on U.S. forces by Iran. And then he's also threatening heavy sanctions on Iraq if indeed American troops are expelled, unless Baghdad agrees to repay billions of dollars in military base construction costs.
Leaders in Europe, meantime, are calling for meetings to work out what they can do about the situation with Iran. We get more from Bloomberg International editor Jody Schneider.
France, Germany, the UK are basically condemning Iran, calling for that emergency NATO meeting, trying to calm tensions, asking that there be calm, that there not be tit-for-tat reprisals.
And tension in the region has oil spiking again today. Here are the details as Bloomberg's Stephen Stepsinski.
More tension in the Middle East could do something to supply that could cut off potentially shipments from the Strait of Hormuz. So we're currently in a situation where folks are very worried whether or not they're going to be able to get this risk off at the moment. So they're doing what they're doing, and this is causing prices to rise.
And checking prices now, NYMEX crude oil is up 1.2% or 73 cents at $63.78 a barrel. Brent is up 1.4% at $69.54.
Now, most analysts believe Iran will retaliate, but it's less clear what form that may take. Sanam Vakil is deputy head of the Middle East at Chatham House.
It's about revenge, but it's also about setting sort of a precedent and a message to the United States that this was sort of one step too far. And here, Iran very much gets to control the narrative of how it responds. And I think Iran has to escalate because it's the only way out of the sanctions-based maximum pressure policy and sort of crisis that it is already undergoing with the Trump administration.
And as the morning wears on, U.S. stock index futures continue to slide lower. S&P futures are down about 20 points. Dow futures down 172 and NASDAQ futures down 65. The DAX in Germany is down 1.6%. 10-year Treasury up 2/30 seconds, yield 1.78%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.52%. And straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg.
Thank you, Karen. 5:33 on Wall Street. Back to Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Thank you very much, Nathan. Lawmakers say President Trump's tweets saying he'll target 52 Iranian sites are not helping after the killing of Iranian General Soleimani by a U.S. drone strike in Iraq. Virginia Democratic Senator Mark Warner spoke on NBC's Meet the Press.
I'm not sure the president, by his kind of taunting tweets, is necessarily trying to de-escalate. I'm not sure how we will be seen as both stronger and smarter if we have our Iraqi allies asking us to leave, if our NATO allies don't feel like they're going to be informed before we take this kind of action. And frankly, if the people in the region that were against the Iranian regime all across the region are now rallying against America.
NBC's Meet the Press can be heard Sundays on Bloomberg Radio. Meanwhile, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham defended the U.S. drone strike in Iraq that killed Iran's top general.
He died not because of the color of his skin or because of his ethnic origins. He died because of the content of his character. He was an evil man. He was a terrorist leader. He had American blood on his hands, and I am glad he's dead, and I'm glad we finally got a president who understands that Iran is the cancer of the Mideast, and they must change.
Graham spoke on Fox News Sunday Morning Futures, which can also be heard on Bloomberg Radio. Former Vice President Joe Biden, reacting to President Trump's Twitter activity over the weekend, says he's tweeting a threat to go after Iran. Officials say 5 people were killed and dozens hospitalized in a Sunday morning crash on the Pennsylvania Turnpike outside of Pittsburgh. The crash involved a bus, 3 tractor-trailers, and a passenger car. Australia's government says it is willing to pay whatever it takes to help communities recover from devastating wildfires. Prime Minister Scott Morrison says the government is committing an extra 2 billion Australian dollars, or $1.4 billion, toward the recovery effort in addition to the sums already committed. Harvey Weinstein is expected